I'm good. How are you? Thank you. Yes. And then, you know what Dallas is, right?
I remember that one.
What's that? Me? As far as right. I say sign. Oh, not yet. No. I did sign over there. Oh, good. Are you talking about? Yes, I signed whatever they have. There's some grant stuff with that. Is there something else I need to sign?
Did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah, it was good. How about you?
New Year's.
That's miserable.
Started the New Year's stuff. Well, we went up snowmobiling up at Fort Slade. Frida, of course.
Uh-huh.
Did not do what I would expect, writing.
Right?
Partly because my balance is so bad. I told the kid that we had for a guide, I said, I can't go off trails.
Okay, we've got a lot on the pre-meeting here, so we should probably get started. Jesse's coming on in. Yeah, we're still.
You reset? For coming down at 5.
We can break it down somehow.
Now, what just breaks you down now?
I'll donate it. I'll donate
Well,
it.
no, but you know, you technically you'll be leaving early, so.
That's an offset. That's an offset.
But
Thank you.
the rest
Thank,
of us.
thank you for pointing that out. I was doing it for the rest of you.
First off, before we get started, I did want to, we have a couple of appointees to the Central Wyoming Senior Services Advisory Board. And they're both here, Jennifer Rohr and Errol Miller. And so I'll have Jennifer go ahead and introduce herself first.
I'm Jennifer Rohr. I was appointed by the City Council in 2014 to complete a term for another board member. I've been on the board since. I've been the board president for the last 2.5 years. And now we're just looking to have a reappointment for the next 2 years. I'll just stay on the board and serve the senior center.
Any questions for Jennifer? Not to age Jennifer, but she and I went to junior high and high school together. We've known each other a long time.
We won't hold
I'm
down
29.
against her.
So.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer.
You and
Errol
Jack
Whitney. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Errol Miller, and I see a lot of faces around here that I do know. I graduated from NC in Casper College. I worked construction in the Casper and Wyoming area for quite a few years, until I retired 5 years ago. Now it's easy. I've been on the board for 2 years and 9 months. I was replaced by the city when Noreen Brower passed away. And so I've been working on various committees. And very happy to be with the people that is on the board right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Errol.
What year did you graduate from NC?
55.
Was it Casper High then?
The year after you.
Pardon me?
Is it Casper High then or Natrona County?
Oh, no, it's NC.
It was all, okay.
Been NC since about 1912.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't quite make it that far.
And the executive directors want to introduce Rita and say hi. And if you had a few words, if you wanted to say anything, Rita.
I don't. I just hope that you will accept the appointments this evening because they've done an excellent job in moving our organization forward, and we have great hopes for the future.
Thank you for all your hard work over there too, Rita. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Another appointment, who you probably all know very well, Civil Service Commission, Mr. Tim Monroe. So, Tim, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, James W. Tim Monroe.
James W. Tim Monroe.
I forgot that until I saw it on the packet.
Yeah.
I'm just glad to be of service to the city.
Well, welcome. Does anybody have any questions for Tim or anything? Thank you, Tim.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it. On to the next part of the agenda, selection of the WAM delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In preparation for the WAM convention that comes up in February, WAM likes to see delegates appointed on behalf of each of the cities and towns that participate in the convention, particularly as it relates to the business meeting and the decisions that are made at those meetings. And so, generally speaking, I think it's been the practice of this council to appoint those who are on the board that likely will be there, in which case Councilman Powell is one of those individuals, and my recommendation would be that we appoint him as a delegate and another individual who might be going as an alternate, if that pleases the council.
I have no investment in this if someone else wants to do it. So
I would just
I will be there in February.
I'd make an unofficial move from at this meeting that Charlie does a
What are
nice
the
job doing
dates
that.
for that?
22nd to the 24th.
I could probably go to that as a, to try to help Charlie as an alternate.
Council okay with
Unless
these?
anybody else
Let's
wanted
just
to.
do it one fell swoop then.
Yeah, where's that gonna be?
Any of the new
Cheyenne.
council members interested?
The winter conference is always in Cheyenne because then you have contact with the legislators.
So council okay with Charlie and Huber going? You guys are okay? Okay.
Encourage you all again to consider coming down. It's worthwhile.
Thank you. Cassie route modifications.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I wanted to set the table a little bit for the discussion that we'll be having this evening pursuant to the route modifications that we're proposing. As you recall, a number of months ago, we had a number of discussions regarding the modifications and potential considerations for saving money with regard to how CATSI operated and everything else. You may also remember that an impetus behind that as well was with regard to a study that Council commissioned a number of months ago that offered and tendered a number of recommendations pursuant to efficiencies and practices and so on and so forth. Council decided to go a different direction, but they did say that they would like to see efficiencies come forward that we would evaluate with the help of users and the organization itself and so on. And so since that time, we have been doing just that. And pursuant to those conversations and those deliberations, the detail of which Aaron can provide you here in just a couple minutes, some modifications are being proposed that we would suggest are not near to the scale that the study would propose or suggest, but indeed do bring some efficiencies to the table that we think will help improve the timeliness of the running of the routes, and my hope is too that indeed will improve ridership. So we're hopeful that the changes, albeit small, will gain efficiency and gain ridership. That's fundamentally where we're coming from. The process that we need to go through to discuss even this level of modification is laborious. We are required to have a public hearing, and that hearing is happening this evening. The purpose of the hearing really is just to take feedback from potential users, from stakeholders, etc. No decisions are needed this evening. Rather just a listening session, if you will. We are then required to have a follow-up discussion wherein the feedback that's been given needs to be evaluated and considered with regard to a potential decision along the lines of whatever level of modification the council sees fit to take. That work session is scheduled for when again?
January 20th.
Okay, so the last work session of this month. And again, that would be the opportunity to evaluate the feedback and give direction thereafter. For tonight's public hearing, I've asked Aaron and Liz's team to give you a lot of detail with regard to what it is that we're proposing for change as a part of this process. In this particular setting, if I could give Aaron just a few minutes of time to talk about the process that we went through to get to this point and entertain any other questions that you might have. We did set some time aside this evening in this forum to do just that. So if I could, Mr. Mayor, turn some time over to Aaron. I'd
Yep.
appreciate it.
Aaron?
Thank you. Real quick, I want to pull up this timeline, kind of what we've been up to. This is a summarized timeline. So what I just handed to the city manager is the proposed changes to each of Casper's routes and just a timeline of this public comment period. So I think you all are familiar with kind of where we, how we got to this place, as Carter just kind of summarized. So to kind of give you a sense of where we're at in this process, a 45-day public comment period started on November 27th, and that ends on January 10th. So that is on Thursday. And so today is kind of this public hearing is really the culmination of this public comment period. So since throughout this period we've had 110 surveys completed as of this afternoon. I think we'll have a lot more following tonight. We've had 2 open houses, one at the beginning of our public comment period and another in mid-December. We've had a meeting with bus drivers to get a sense of what their understanding is of the routes and what needs to be focused on. We've met with a newly formed committee of riders that call themselves Friends of Catsy. It's a group of dedicated riders who are advocates for riders of Catsy in the bus, and they've been very active, and we've been working with them really closely. And then tonight we have our public hearing. Following tonight's public hearing, we'll be having a working meeting with the Friends of Catsy on the 14th. And I wanted to invite all of you all to join us at this working meeting. We'll be sitting down with staff, riders, and anyone else who are interested to really hash out any final recommendations that come before this council. And then, as the city manager mentioned, we have our final work session to review proposed changes, and then a tentative council meeting for February 5th. So that's kind of what we've been up to and where we're going. Do you all have any questions for me this time?
Any questions for you? Good. Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, you're meeting with the drivers. It seemed like they would have the best sense of what's really going on out there.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything that surprised you, or did you get any sense of their comfort level with these changes?
Yeah, I think the one thing so the bus drivers first and foremost are really great advocates for the riders. They know where they're going, where they're coming from, which bus routes aren't being used, which bus routes maybe need more attention. But the most important thing that I think we got from the drivers that we can't really get anywhere else is a sense for the safety of the riders and the drivers themselves. So we identified some particular areas where we need to adjust for safety purposes. For instance, you'll see, as I'll detail later during the public hearing, there's a change on the blue route where we're recommending removing a stop to avoid making a dangerous left-hand turn. And that's something that we just didn't know about until we really talked with the drivers. So that's just an example. So yes, the drivers really know these routes like the back of their hand, and we felt it was really important to talk to them about this.
And I assume they had no major problems with these modifications?
No. I think they had some concerns about removing some stops, and very similar kind of feedback that we're getting from riders as well. And so we're going to take that and then make adjustments for our final recommendation to this body. And that's why we're doing this working meeting with the the ridership committee is so that we can kind of identify those areas where we do need to take into consideration what we've learned throughout this period. So, but I would say there's not any major hesitations in the drivers. And by the way, with this, our memo for the January 29th meeting, we'll be putting together a report of everything that we learned. So it'll be a summary of not just what we learned from riders, but also from the drivers.
One more. if
Yeah,
I may.
you bet.
I think we'll want to ask this out on the floor as well, but can you describe what we're gaining with these changes? When we talk about efficiencies, what are we talking about here that we're going to be able to do that we're not able to do now?
Sure, yeah. Your Honor, I think the biggest change is, as the city manager alluded to, these aren't major like we discussed back in June and July, but what we are finding are small efficiencies to be made, and that means removing bus stops that aren't really used very often or have very low ridership, making adjustments where to eliminate some confusion that has decreased ridership on some routes. And I think there are some changes where we think we can actually increase ridership. Also the benefit going along with some of these adjustments is just reducing mileage while also maintaining current levels of service. And that means less maintenance costs, less fuel costs.
Thank you.
Mike?
Did the drivers or anybody give you any feeling that with any of these stops that you're deleting or changes, that there were any particularly high need people that the bus was going to become less accessible or less easy for them to use?
There's, I don't have any final conclusions based on based on this process, but so far what we've heard is there's a particular stop near NCHS on the red route that that you'll see tonight that we threw out there that was is proposed to be removed, and we've gotten feedback that says no, we really want to see that remain. That's a bad one to consider. And so there have been a couple stops where we know we need to reconsider, and it's due to either a particular destination that people don't want to lose access to, or it's because it might affect how they get around to their destinations. They may have to cross a busy street.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of if there's a particularly immobile person that lives near a stop, but then they'd have to go, 5 blocks away to, those kind of things.
Generally, most bus stops aren't in front of somebody's house, so anybody who needs that level of service, they're going to be using taxi rather than bus.
Okay, so these wouldn't make it harder for a really immobile person?
Yeah, generally not.
Yeah, okay.
Questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, your question brings up a point that I think needs to be potentially repeated, and that is the changes that we're talking about here are really only for the fixed route portion of the services that are provided through CATSI. None of the dial ride services that are provided are being suggested for alteration or being considered in the public hearing process that we're going through. So just to be real clear, we're only talking about bus routes, fixed routes. We're not talking about dial-a-ride routes or CATSI routes.
Well, and I think it'd probably be a real good idea, to broadcast that pretty well in the public hearing there. Because I understood that, but still I just kind of wondered if there were any impacts out there like that.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Is that it?
Yes, sir.
That is all. Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work on that. Skilled nursing facility, Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You recall probably several weeks ago when council was talking about the decision that was made at the committee level with regard to locating the skilled nursing facility in Buffalo versus our humble community. much of your question at that point in time was, well, what is it that the legislators and committee members and so forth received to, to state our case along those lines. And furthermore, what I thought was really helpful as well was with regard to, did the material consider this or that or this approach or whatever? And so we asked if we could bring these materials to you in a setting of this nature to go over that data and take any feedback that you might have with regard to our approach that potentially we didn't consider in the last go-round. I will tell you that we had a really helpful discussion a few days ago, since the holidays, that we sat the legislators down and kind of debriefed the whole scenario and the whole process up until this point. And they gave us some really good feedback as well that has given us some direction with regard to repackaging much of the data that you see in this packet here in front of you. If I could real quickly go through some of this data, entertain any questions, and again, gather whatever direction or insights you might have. I think that would meet the purpose of what I was hoping was what council wanted to see this evening. Again, referring back to this packet here, what you have really is the culmination of information that we put together to submit to committee members and legislators that had interest in this. As you can see, the first part of the information we gathered and put together was really a white paper that laid out the important facts that we thought were critical with regard to why we thought Casper was the best location for this type of facility. This comes on the heels of a study that the state commissioned that went through each of the sites, and as you recall, Casper and Buffalo weren't the only sites that were on the short list, if you will. Sheridan was also a part of the short list also. And their information was evaluated through the study that the state took on or commissioned or whatever. The important thing to remember about the study that I would put in front of you as kind of the filter to look at all this through is that indeed Casper was selected as the best site to locate this facility. The state's study chose Casper as the best site to locate this facility. However, the committee decided, in contradiction to that particular study that they commissioned, to locate elsewhere. Pursuant to that, we think some of the facts that they brought out were important, and you'll see that located in this white paper information. However, if you turn past the white paper and the memo from CADA and look at some of these exhibits that we put together, I think they graphically represented the case that Casper made fairly well. For example, in this particular map here, we tried to illustrate at a glance the advantage that Casper has with regard to serving the most veterans in Wyoming. You'll notice that some of these blue spheres and so forth get close to our borders and actually serve some residents and veterans from Wyoming, but probably more veterans from outside the state. The orange-looking color in the middle of that graphic indicates that Casper actually has a potential to serve 41,000 of Wyoming's veterans, which is far and above the catchment area that not only our competing facilities would potentially serve, but other facilities located nearby and or other communities would potentially have the possibility of serving as well. I think that that's a pretty huge demonstration of the value of locating the facility in Casper. We have a blow-up of that particular chart on the next page that I think more appropriately focuses in on Casper, Buffalo, and Sheridan and the advantages Casper has over those areas. If you turn to the aerial that we have in the packet as well, you'll notice the way in which they thought the campus could lay out with regard to the area that you authorized to be offered for consideration for this facility. Turning the graphic this way so that you can kind of look at the way that the drawing is oriented. The parcel that you authorize is on the corner of 12th and Conwell. They dropped in the concept of what the facility could look like should it be built here in Casper. Some of the advantages that we think this particular location has is with regard to its location to a number of services that clientele would be served appropriately with. The hospital, as you know, is located just a few blocks up the road on Conwell. We have a fire station just a few blocks up the road on Beverly. We have a number of social services that not only could veterans potentially access, but potentially maybe even volunteer at, should they have that capacity. The other thing that we added to the mix that many of you are aware of as well is with regard to allowing portions of LifeSteps campus to be used for administrative functions that would ostensibly lower the cost of construction for the Casper facility, which in many ways was considered an advantage for the other competing facilities in that they had existing facilities that they potentially would offer for administrative uses and thereby not requiring that type of construction. Coincidentally, that portion of the LifeSteps campus was not offered on the initial application and therefore may have been lost as an important point reducing the cost for construction here in Casper. Another thing that was brought out later that I find perplexing was with regard to a tertiary study that was commissioned by someone in the state. We haven't figured out which agency or individual that might have done that, that indicated that this particular parcel might have had some disadvantages with regard to potential contamination. The tertiary study, again, separate and apart from the primary level 1 and 2 study that were commissioned by the state earlier in the process, identified the old refinery located north and east from this property, which incidentally would be down gradient as well, as a potential contaminating factor to this site. There is also another indication that the gas station located west of this, almost exactly due west of this property, had leaking tanks that would potentially contaminate this property as well. I want you to know that those recommendations, or suggestions I should say, were not based on data that they found at the site, but rather suspicions perhaps that they picked up in their third review of this area. I'll tell you that we have taken the extra step of hiring a geotechnical firm that evaluated the property in much more closer detail than it has been done at this point in time. And the study that we have commissioned has indicated that they could find no contamination at this point in time. So in our opinion, those suspicions are just that, and they're completely unfounded and not based on any data or reasonable assumption to this point in time. Beyond that, as I mentioned, there are a number of other sort of white papers that we have put together and addressed at various portions of the evaluation to this point in time to try to meet the needs of the questions of the day and the audience and everything else. But this pretty well represents what it is that we've put together so far. As I mentioned earlier, we are working on a draft just as we speak to refashion for the next committee that'll get this assignment starting in a couple weeks. And so we are endeavoring to follow this conversation closely, and we anticipate being in place when the conversations occur. I appreciate those of you who have participated in this conversation to date, and we will likely be drawing upon your help and insight and wisdom moving forward as well.
Bob.
Thank you.
Just a couple more suggestions, I guess. I outline the area in red, a nice big red line, put a circle around the building. And I would also, and I realize this is more work for staff, to take a blow-up of this and identify every medical facility within, call it a half-mile range. Same kind of picture, just draw a circle around all the medical facilities. And I realize that'd be a lot of work, but.
Mike, sorry.
Carter, I really want to compliment you on your presentation. I think you guys have done a great job with this. But just a couple of little wordsmithing changes. When you talk about the fire station, it's just around the corner. It's not a few blocks away. It's just around the corner. The hospital is a couple blocks away. Because
You
if
betcha.
you look, you're not fudging the thing. But, the fire station's just around the corner. The hospital is a couple blocks away.
A stone's throw. How about
Yeah,
that?
stone's throw is even better.
There you go. Jesse and then Charlie.
I just want to let everybody know that Councilwoman-elect Roots messaged me, and she's in the ER with her kiddo, and I said, don't worry about it. There's plenty of Tuesdays for the next 4 years that she can hit, so focus on her family first. So she might not be
Charlie.
Two things, because in the meeting, the contamination, it sounded as though the contamination was sort of what they hung their hat on as a rule out. As that, and I don't see anything in the CADA paper that addresses that, but that will be addressed in the revision. All of the work that we've done to prove that this is a safe site.
Mr. Mayor-elect, yes, I would answer that simply by saying, yes, you're correct. That will be addressed in more succinctly in the information that we're working on right now. The information that we shared verbally with regard to that conversation was along the lines of, hey, look, if indeed you do find that there's some dirt there that's dirty, the city of Casper has within its capacity to be able to excavate that and get it out of the picture. And so we offered the opportunity to take that issue off the table, and we will continue to make that made known while we're down there. And I should tell you too, the legislators, our council person, and CADA have been outstanding partners in the promotion of this discussion and Casper as the most appropriate site. And so I could tell you we really wouldn't have much traction without this.
And just, if I may
Yeah,
follow.
go ahead,
And
Dallas.
the,
No, go ahead.
well, and the other item that seemed important to me was all of the specialists that the veterans would have access to. Since we're trying to strike the theme that this is about the veterans, not the needs of respective communities. And I assume that will also be laid out in pretty graphic form, that all of these specialists are right here, and these individuals who will often be frail and may not tolerate transportation well will have easy access to them instead of having to drive up to Billings or from Buffalo down to Casper to get specialty care. And that will be a big part of it, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I think it's obvious to everybody that Casper's the best place to have this. I don't think that's the problem. There's some political issue here. So what I'm wondering is, who do you actually have to convince to change the choice? You know?
Well,
Because
Mr. Mayor.
I want the names, so I'm gonna write them all a letter.
Oh, good.
I need to know who they are, because I don't think that everything you've all been saying is great, and I think they knew all that. We've all known all of that. I don't think any of that's gonna change their mind. I think it's some other political issue. And I do believe it's because they don't want, a lot of these other places just don't want Casper to get some of the bacon. Now, the fact that, the one thing I heard that I think would really be helpful is this study that says there's no contamination. So that's a change in fact that they can't deny. The rest of this stuff, I think, is nice to put it together, and Kate, it's nice paper and all that, but I don't think it'll have much impact. I think if you can show there's a fact that is incorrect, it's material, then somebody has to look at a change in their decision. But you're preaching to the choir with all this stuff right now. So who is it that has to have a firm understanding of this? The precise people that vote on this. And that's who I would be sending our emissary to with the information and get this so that they know it precisely. Otherwise, they're not going to change anything.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, there's basically two levels of that type of advocacy that we would need. One would be at the committee level, that this bill will be assigned to. At this point in time, that committee is unclear, as the Speaker has not made that assignment at this point in time on the House side. Following that discussion at the committee level, a bill will come forward that the House will have to work over and ultimately decide on the floor. And so you have the committee that you make a stop at, and then you have the debate on the floor that hopefully our team would be effective at persuading to consider.
So we do know one person, Steve Harshman, who's the Speaker.
He is.
So somebody needs to go talk to Steve Harshman and let him know exactly what happened and what this major fact mistake was. Because he could tell you why they voted that down.
Absolutely.
Whether he, I don't think he would right now, but he could tell you. But I'm talking about the precise people that voted against us. We need to know their names and we need to go to them. Otherwise, I don't think it'll work, Carter. I've never seen it work before, unless you can get right there with that person and talk to them. It all gets
Horshman also
lost
picks
in-
the committee.
It all gets lost in a file folder somewhere. But they know that this is the best place for it. So to address the real issue and get rid of a fact that they're using against us that isn't true, gives us a shot. Otherwise, I don't think there's a shot in changing it.
I agree with every single thing that Councilman Laird's just said, and especially that about the change in fact. You know, I mean, this was a lawsuit, and you can go back in and say, hey, whoa, wait a minute, there's a big change in fact. You know, that's a big deal. The other thing that, and you know, ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised to see this be a floor fight, you know, in the legislature. And so I think that all the facts that we've got here, plus the stuff that Charlie was talking about, but I think we need to reach out to our neighboring counties, Fremont, Carbon, you know, Uinta, everywhere, and say, you know, do you want families from Rock Springs, if they want to come visit Uncle Harold, to come to Casper and then up to Buffalo? Are they going to do that as often as if they only have to come to Casper? Let alone Rawlins, Douglas, Torrington, anywhere else. And so I think we need to reach out to all of those areas and say, hey guys, geez, you know, this is about serving not only the veterans of your communities, but also their families, so that, you know, if family wants to come and see Uncle Chris when he's doddering around in the nursing home, you know, they can, because that's a big, important deal. Mm-hmm. And if it's another 200 miles round trip, that's going to tip the scale where these people don't come and visit as often.
Chris, you two might have good insight on this, because it's not a rational argument that is to be made. It's an emotional argument, 100%. And so the reason that I think we didn't get this was not because of the failed contamination study, but it was the appeal of continuity of care of the people in the Soldiers and Sailors Home now. What if they progress to the need for having medical services provided to them? You're going to devastate them if you move them to Casper. Why not move across the street? And there was talk about our weather and our altitude and all that kind of stuff. And how nice it is in Sheridan as opposed to it is to residential in Casper. So it's an emotional decision. And then there's a bias against Casper and Cheyenne among the rest of the state. I don't know that we would get much support Rock Springs or anybody saying if you want it. I don't know.
We won't if we don't try.
But
But I
Petition
think
of
you're,
veterans, a petition of 2,000 veterans saying we want Casper might help us. And I don't know, I think that was overlooked, and I think if we're really serious,
it wasn't by Buffalo. They brought in
their
veterans
people, but
Yeah.
they got it from the people living there, and that's the final deal. But if you got 2,000 veterans from around the state, or how many ever you can possibly get, that said, no, we think Casper's the place for these reasons everybody's been expounding on, that's a big piece, but that's the political piece. 'Cause if they say the majority of veterans wants it in Casper, I think we got a chance. But if I go here at Harshman and tell me it's all the veterans up in Buffalo wanted to stay there, you're a dead duck. And the only way, we all know we got better. Everything that's been said tonight, everybody knows. Period. And I don't think any of it has much to do with how they voted. So it's more of a political vote. Now, I'd say you're right, that issue with those veterans voting to have it there probably tipped them over. But if the majority of veterans vote here, it'll tip them back over, in my opinion. It's a lot of work to go do that, but if you really want to do it, just selling them on maps and everything and what we've got and how close something is to the hospital, that ain't gonna cut, that isn't a material fact. He's a judge for 35 years. Ask him how many times he reversed himself. Very few, unless somebody showed him a complete erroneous fact that he may have assumed, and he saw that, and then he would change it. But you couldn't do it any other way.
have we talked to any of the veterans groups or anything? When I was out wandering around campaigning, I met this guy, and I wish that I'd kept his card, but I didn't. That claimed to be some leader of the Legion and VFW and all that stuff, and I wish that I still had his card, but
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we have, and we have tried to mobilize them to come to the committee meetings and those kinds of things, and in some cases we were successful, in some cases we were not. But indeed, we will continue that and be sure that we do get their support as best we can. I like the conversation with regard to neighboring counties and veterans potentially from there as well. I think that carries a lot of weight.
Have a big banquet honoring veterans, they'll all come down and have your petitions ready, and they'll all sign it. Because you really want this, Carter. It's really a big deal, and it's a money-making deal, and a good deal for Casper, which I believe it is. You can't do it in the normal way.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you gotta have some big deal and get them all here, a good place would have been for people to go up at the laying of the wreaths, because a lot of people who were veterans were laying those wreaths too. And I asked them all, they can't understand why it wasn't in Casper, but nobody's got their name down on a petition yet.
Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Harshman says
Got a
one
good skull
thing.
on it, I think.
Harshman says one thing, if you want to be big, think big. That's one of his sayings, and I think he's right.
I think he's right.
Procedural explanation of appeal and planning.
Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I turn this to our city attorney?
Not at all. Thank you for being you and being held Sorry. It's fine. Go ahead, John.
Your Honor, Counsel, thank you very much. This is an appeal that you're going to hear tonight, which we haven't heard since I've been here as your city attorney. It's an appeal from the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission had go before them a application for a conditional use in a general business zone. The conditional use that isn't typically permitted there, but what they wanted to have there is a billboard. So the question for you tonight is whether or not that billboard should be permitted on Poplar Street in this area that's depicted in the exhibits that you have before you. The procedure is basically just like we have at any other public hearing. The ordinance that addresses this is unusual in that this is an appeal, but basically you can hear any new evidence. You are permitted to, and in fact we provided you with the evidence
I'll call
and
you
the
later.
facts from the original Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, including the videotape if you wanted to watch that. In fact, that's queued up so that you can watch it if you haven't had a chance to watch it during the process of the council meeting, though it's about 14 minutes long. So, in that regard, the mayor will call the public hearing to order, and he'll let me go ahead and make some introduction of the exhibits, which they are very extensive, and you have a list of those in front of you. And at that point, then he'll ask the proponent, the appellant, which would be the Lamar Sign Company and their attorney, Mr. Stubson, to present their case. They'll be able to come forward with any witnesses they want, or anyone else from the audience can come forward and make a presentation. And I know in our general public hearing procedures, we only allow 5 minutes, and we have that in our instructions tonight too. But I would ask the mayor and the council members to be a little lenient with that, since these people actually have a personal interest involved, a property interest involved in this decision. So if they need some more time, if you'd be accommodating in that regard, I think that would be advantageous and appropriate under these circumstances. Once the Lamar people, the people in support of overturning the Planning Commission have had their say, then other people will be invited to the podium to oppose the appeal. And that would be Ms. White, and she may have her tenant or renter there as well, and there may be other people as well. Now, I know that Lamar has at least 3 additional exhibits they want to introduce, which is perfectly appropriate, and Ms. White may have some exhibits or additional facts too that she wants to bring out. At the conclusion of everyone speaking, and you are all welcome to ask questions throughout the course of this, at the conclusion of that, then the public hearing will be closed, and you will basically be able to bring the matter to a vote, have a motion, a second. At that point, and you can go into discussion, talk it over between yourselves. Of course, you're on the record because it's a public meeting. And then you can call for the vote, see if the resolution passes or fails. If it fails, then you'll probably go to the alternative resolution and see if that one passes subsequently. Pretty much like you've been through multiple times, but it's just a little bit of a different twist. Councilman Powell.
John, I'll ask this on the floor as well, but just so we're all aware, would we have the authority to say, we'll approve a sign, but it can only be 15 feet high and 100 square feet?
You can, in fact, make some modifications, and that's permitted within the ordinance itself. So if you see some type of, if you believe that the signage should be permitted, but you want to make some modifications and make it more palatable to those people who are objecting, you may do that.
Yeah, Dels.
Why did they need to have a hearing on this? Are they not entitled to do this just by the straight run of the zoning?
They went to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission ruled against the application for the conditional use permit by Lamar Signs and Mr. DeWall. And according to the ordinance, they have a right to appeal that to council. So the Planning and Zoning Commission did not have the final say on that. They have the right to bring it to you all.
But my question, Mr. Henley, was not, I understand that. My question is, why couldn't they just put up a sign without asking us?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's because the property is zoned general business. So general business, you have a myriad of occupations there, as well as residential. And in fact, this area of Poplar Street has a lot of residential associated with it. But they did not have permission, it's not within the zoning regulations, that you can put an off-premises sign and billboard up in this particular zoning categorization. Therefore, they had to apply for the conditional use.
So they're looking for an exemption to our law as it is, saying they can't have it unless somebody hears proper evidence and overrides what the law is.
It would be their request that they can have a body look at it and see if in fact it would be appropriate under the circumstances, the current composure of the neighborhood and what they want to do, if there's really any type of detriment to the associated landowners, or if this would be a benefit to the city.
And the zoning commission felt that there was some detriment to the owners?
In looking at the findings of fact and conclusions of law, they did in fact deny the conditional use permit, so I believe they did find that.
The way I read it, they denied it because the billboard is lit at night and there's an apartment house there and will block the tenant's view of the mountain and then have light till 11 or 12 at night.
And the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think they probably did consider that in looking at the transcript. And, but that is not binding upon you at all. This is an appeal, and you're not bound by any of their findings. But of course, you can consider them because, of course, they looked at the evidence that you're looking at.
Bob and then Charlie.
Thank you. Just for my clarification, this sign would not have been legal if that were still in the OYD, is that correct?
This would not be legal in the, no, you're right about that.
Right.
Yes.
And we took that area out of the OYD. And you have to kind of dig through the pictures and so forth to find out that this sign is 10 feet 6 tall, 22 feet 8 inches wide, and sticks up 35 feet in the air.
And actually, I have seen the exhibits by Lamar, and that will be pretty well depicted tonight, how that will look in a scale form, I believe. So you might be looking at that as far as looking at how the signage would actually fit within the dimensions of the neighborhood. I think that'll be pretty well evident tonight pursuant to some of these exhibits.
Sure.
I don't know how many of you had a chance to watch the video, but the Planning and Zoning Commission, there was a long pause before they could get someone to make a motion and get a second to even discuss this, and it was a unanimous vote against, just so you're all aware. There were no statements made by any of the commission members in favor of this.
We have a good commission going, that's thorough and understanding.
I'm not saying we should agree with them, I'm just saying that's what happened.
I mean, what I would say, I'll jump in, I know Carter's gonna say something too. I mean, we from time to time have had that happen where they come and appeal, and I think that's part of the process. And I think it's just kind of up to looking at each situation as it comes. I've always said looking at each situation as they come in, and looking at that, and so I know where I'm gonna fall on it, so.
Now, this is a billboard just like any other billboard around town that they want to erect and then lease out to lawyers to advertise for seat belts or, you know, Verizon or anybody else. It's not associated with a business that's Pizza Hut that's right across the street or anything like that, yeah. They just want to put it up to lease it out,
And it's about the size of that wall,
but taller.
And lit up.
but it'll be up, yeah, raised up 10 feet.
Quick, Carter.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that question fits right into what the question I would have for Mr. Henley would be, is there anything in the permit application at this point in time that would suggest that it wouldn't be electronic?
It will in fact be, and this was part of the discussion at the Planning and Zoning Commission, that it will be lit until about 11 p.m. It will have some type of controls on the lighting so that it shouldn't be reflective on the residents in the neighborhood. And you'll be able to ask the individuals who will be there to discuss tonight exactly how that works.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Attorney, I think an interesting question that might be asked if council were so inclined as to whether or not there would be a commitment on the part of the applicant to not make it electronic, which would be more akin to what you would see in a jumbotron sort of scenario, where a variety of ads could be run across the face of it, whatever face they decide to go that route, or not. And so.
And they did commit that this would not be a rotating type of ad, that it would be a vinyl that would simply be illuminated, as they testified at the earlier hearing, though it never hurts to ask it again.
Well, Carter,
Yeah.
this came up a while back, and so I went up and looked at I don't know if anybody went up to that intersection, but where they wanted, this guy bought that old house, and what he wants to do is put this huge sign, and the unit of the sign is big. I mean, it's got a base this big around. And what it does, the height that you suggested, it goes up and blocks the second story of the apartment house that's right there. And then all those people who are renting in that apartment house have no view, it blocks the light, and then however the light reflecting off that sign reacts. And so I saw what the woman had said and what her renter said. She's afraid it's going to devalue her property, and the renter wouldn't want to live there because he doesn't have any more view. So a sign that size, 10 feet up, is going to block anything in a second story apartment house. Charlie, I don't know if you've gone up there and actually seen how that's set up.
Just one more question, John. If this were more purely commercial area, because this is a street that's in transition, along Second Street,
The sign is 10 feet.
would the code allow a business to put up a sign this size that would essentially block the view of the adjacent business as people were driving down? I mean, are there any code restrictions in a more purely commercial area?
Well, if it's your own signage, you have a little bit more flexibility in that regard. This is an off-premise sign, so it has some more restrictions in it, some more restrictions. So it's not like there's a business right in front, so there's a house, and then they put the sign in front of the house. So there's a little disconnect, but in fact, if you own property and you're a business owner, you're entitled to have signage in front of your business. As to the exact dimensions, that may be modified to some extent.
Do we typically have that 250 square foot maximum in a purely commercial area as well?
You know, we can do that typically in the commercial areas, and that's come up with respect to a couple of the businesses down on A Street or something along those lines, yes.
Go ahead, Mike.
When this was discussed at the planning and zoning, did they or anyone draw any comparisons, say, to East 12th Street to East 2nd Street or any other areas that might be sort of a mixed use thing where there already are huge, great big billboards up there, but
I don't know that.
having said that, I don't think that, you know, this location is still pretty much primarily just residential in there, whereas 12th Street, 2nd Street, those are pretty much commercial.
Plus, there's nobody here that would want that in front of their house, I don't think. I wouldn't want one there on my knee.
Sunday wouldn't like that?
Sunday wouldn't like
You wouldn't have to go too far.
He'd bark the whole time.
Okay, see you on out there.
That'd be better than
Especially
having
if
his
they
own
put a
fire
big
hydrant.
advertisement on there for the porn shop.
Good evening. I now call the January 8th, 2019 regular council meeting to order. Would council members please denote your presence by depressing your guest switch?
All council members are present.
Council meetings are always televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. I'm just looking for a second. There's a young man. How about Mr. Friel? Do you want to come up here and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance today?
There's some adorable girls on.
Oh, do you guys want to come up and help me too? Bates kiddos?
It's not really a question.
Yeah, actually just come on up. And then I'll have my daughter come up and help me too. Come on up here, guys. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The joy on their faces is wonderful. Did you see the excitement? Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. Chair to entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the December 18, 2018 council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on December 30th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve by minute action the January 8, 2019 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Morgan, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Any abstentions? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. At this time, as you know, we have 3 outgoing members of council leaving us. Those council members are Humphrey, Morgan, and Laird. If they would actually come forward right up here, that would be great. So these are plaques that they have, and I'm going to have them come speak in a second, but I just want to recognize them for their service. In particular, Councilman Humphrey, who's been on service here for 12 years. And so, but I want to recognize all 3 of them, and I know they're going to have some comments here in a second, but I just want to recognize them with their plaques. So.
We need a photo op. Who has the camera? Somebody.
Everybody out there, yeah.
Nobody wants to take pictures.
Nobody has a cell phone out there? Rhonda, do you have one?
Laura's got us. Okay. All right. Come here. Wait. Female in the middle. I'm still gonna boss them around.
We'll get one for Sunday, yes. As I had mentioned, I'll say it in the microphone, Council Member Humphrey has served 12 years and has been here, oh gosh, seems like a long time. And so this is a, I told her actually in the back in our meeting room that this is a end of an era. And so just wanted to make sure that that's relayed in the hard work that you've done. So thank you so much. So do you have any? Yeah.
guys are gonna have an amazing new era. So rather than give everybody a boring speech, for those of you that know me, I have to shake things up a little bit. So really, the most important thing that I can say to everyone is, I love you, council, I love you, city staff, and I love the citizens. Dallas and I have had some conversations about my multiple hair colors. So I have a presentation, and the first part is for you, Dallas, so that everybody can see my hair colors. So let's go for it.
Oh, dear Lord. Thank you guys for an amazing 12 years. Oh, excuse me, my phone's ringing. Hello.
Oh, you want to take me on a hot date tonight? I'm almost done with council, so I'll see you all later. Thank you, guys.
That's how I want to go out. Councilman Morgan, would you care to have any comments this evening?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, I don't have any props or a presentation, but I do have a few words. I can't do it. I just got a haircut. So. You know, I was just getting used to this whole city council thing, so it's kind of unfortunate it's coming to an end right now. And, you know, looking back over the last 2 years, you typically see the sort of changes that happen over, you know, multiple terms, or if ever, for that matter. We hired a new city manager, a new city attorney. We changed our municipal court system from a part-time judge to a full-time judge. And on top of all of that, our city manager hired a new chief financial officer, a new chief of police, and a new fire chief. So all of these positive changes that happened will hopefully set up our new city council members in a much better position than what I faced in the first 6 months that I took my term. And this will offer, these long-term changes will offer greater stability to our organization and hopefully peace of mind to our citizens. Next, you know, during my campaign, there was a few principles that I kind of ran on, and I hope that you see that I accomplished those to the best of my ability, and that was just being open and transparent. I think it's important that you know what I'm doing for you, and you know, how I'm doing that and how I'm conveying myself in a meeting. I also offered spending accountability. I think it's important that you understand where our tax dollars are going, and I hope I also conveyed to you why our tax dollars are going to those services that we're providing for our community. When you look at leadership in the 21st century, you know, you really gotta embrace technology, and you know, I hope I set the bar to a standard that you would ask other representatives to also ask for out of their leadership. You know, you see news organizations, for instance, embracing technology, changing, you know, their original business plan. So when you really look at a leader and what they're doing and how they're being transparent, I hope you look for that, because it's not that elected official that gets left behind when it comes to technology. It's their entire base, and in some cases, it's the entire community that's left behind. I gotta really give a shout out to a couple of key people that got me here, and that's of course my wife for believing in me, and of course she's not here tonight, unfortunately, because it's extracurricular activities occur on Tuesdays, so it's my son's first soccer practice tonight. So she's not here, she's with him, and I'm looking forward to spending more time, of course, with him and attending those. But really, I owe her a lot. I owe Bunky Locks for talking me into throwing my name into the hat. I'm not sure if I should thank him or not, but he finally convinced me just minutes before the filing deadline to, you know, you make a great leader. I believe in you. Go for it. And I kind of did, and the rest is history. After that, I really got to thank all of those that believed in me, took a chance on this young guy to represent them. So I really appreciate them voting for me, believing in me. You've certainly made me a better person, and I appreciate your support. I got to thank city staff for your hard work and dedication to the organization, because you know, a lot of people, they don't quite realize what it takes, and I find that unfortunate. So, you know, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything that you've done over the last couple of years and that you'll continue to do. And I got to also apologize for 2017. That was a tumultuous year for everyone, I believe. And, you know, anytime that you lose a manager and other people in a department, everybody takes on additional responsibilities, and, you know, it's the same pay. So the only way that I could say thanks enough is voting in favor for that cost of living increase and bonus. The department heads and captains within the police department have certainly proven their capabilities and leadership. You really kept everything going. Next, you know, to the city council members that are stepping in here, you know, I thank you for stepping up to serve your community. That takes a lot to put yourself in this position always somewhat be scrutinized and then portrayed in a certain light. And thank you for choosing to serve the community. The only advice really I have is make sure you ask questions. You know, it never hurts to take an extra moment to ask that question or even table a new motion that's happening. If you feel that all council members don't have all the information, go ahead and table it. Bring it to a work session. Talk about it. Let's get the facts straight. Let's see what we can do to make sure that our city is put in a better position than what we have it now. And, you know, you kind of get the mentality every now and again, you know, you don't need to ask that question. Don't worry about it. Let's get into the weeds. And I think that kind of reared its ugly head during my term in the form of a healthcare deficit that's gone out of control. I think that's too bad, but we know about it now. That's great. We're working on it. And hopefully you can overcome that in the coming years. On top of that, we had legacy debts that we didn't know about, and we've corrected that, and we've paid that, which is great. And, you know, we had a kind of disgruntled police department, and that was scary at times. And I think the police department's still in a really fragile state. It's concerning to officers, it's concerning to me, and it should be concerning to you that, you know, if we continue this trend, we may see more officers protecting thousands of students as opposed to officers protecting tens of thousands of residents. So I hope you hold our, you know, city manager accountable for that. He's certainly proven himself capable of overcoming any challenge and obstacle when given the right direction. So ask those questions. You know, you can't do it enough. And the city attorney, he's an incredible attorney and a great man, and I appreciate everything that you've done personally. And always ask for any guidance that he has to offer. He's a great asset to this council and this organization. So feel free to reach out to him, whether it's a quick amendment or a quick question of municipal code or state law and how you interpret it. He'll definitely provide greater insight. And at the end of the day, you know, it's basically up to you. It's your responsibility. You can take all the advice that you want. I wouldn't say that you should add anyone else as a 10th or an 11th council member, but take their advice and follow your beliefs, follow your constituents. At the end of the day, it's all the responsibilities on your shoulders, and I wish you good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman Morgan. Councilman Laird.
Caneen Humphrey, and a lot of people don't know how to pronounce Caneen. I didn't until I met her on the council, but one of the things that wasn't mentioned, she's a 4-time mayor. Been on the council 12 years, been the mayor 4 times. Now that's pretty impressive because 4 different councils had to vote her in. And I know it's not easy to be voted in as mayor, but she, I think, holds the record. And I thank her for the assistance that she gave me and counseled me about putting my name in to become a city councilman. I thank all the councilmen here because they voted for me. I was not elected. I've served 22 months, and I tell everybody it's the lowest paying job I've ever had, but it was the most fun. But one of the things that I thought about is what really is the duty of a city council person. I remember when my grandmother used to refer to us as the city fathers. Now she'd say the city fathers and mother. But we are servants of our citizens. And I take that very seriously. And I feel like we're the guardians of the citizens' money. And we have to understand what our citizens want us to do. Because sometimes what the citizens want us to do is different what management may want us to do. Different maybe than what we ourselves want to do. And I can only suggest that, and Jesse said it, is that everybody should ask questions. I learned a long time ago, I was at a seminar and they had asked questions and nobody had raised their hand. And finally the guy said, you know, the only dumb question is one that you don't ask. And many people won't ask questions because they think that it'll make them feel stupid or unknowledgeable. But if you don't ask the question, you are going to remain unknowledgeable. So, of course, I'm an attorney, and my job is to ask a lot of questions. So it was a little easier for me to ask questions. But you don't want to be gullible. And one of the foundations of gullibility is just resting on what other people tell you and not trying to get to the truth of things. You do have to listen to people, and I pay a lot of attention to the experts, and we have great experts working for the city, starting with the manager. I've known a lot of managers, and I think he's the best one we've ever had. And I'm hoping he's going to stay here for a little while. But he's assembled a great staff, and they're sitting over there. And I've told them all, whether I've argued with them, whether I've disagreed with them, they're good, hardworking people. And I appreciate them. And I am honored, to have served the citizens of Casper. And I'm happy to be leaving. I don't regret leaving. It's just that time for me. It seems like it's a great experience, and for me, I'm moving on to some other things. I see some citizens here that I love, and I want to make sure they get their rides and they're taken care of, because I know how important that bus system is to them, as well as other citizens who have to manage their property and fight for their own rights. And I think that this group of city council people are great, every one of them. They're smart, they're knowledgeable, and the truth is they want to do the right thing. So thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, you've been a great mayor. You've got a young guy coming in after you, I guess, who's been mayor before. Very knowledgeable gentleman, and the city's in good hands. Our three new council members, I've met them all, and they all bring things to the table that makes a well-rounded council. Thank you very much.
Again, I just want to extend and recognize all three of them for their hard work, dedication that they've put in over the course of the last several years, and of course, Kaneen for the last 12. And so thank you for all that, and enjoy your Tuesday nights off. Before I announce the 2019 council members to come and take their seats, I did want to let everybody know that council member-elect Kristen Lutz had a family emergency tonight and will not be able to make our meeting to be sworn in, but she will be sworn in at a later date, and we will excuse her at a later date. So at this time, if the new council members would please come forward and take their seats, please.
Sunday says, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for letting him come to the meeting.
Thank you, Sunday.
I know, I'm too. I'm going to sit out there. I think I'm moving to the left, and somehow that's uncomfortable.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I left you.
So
Right?
you're right next to Johnson on the other side of Johnson, where Dallas was. That's right.
We'll take it.
You get sworn in too as well, right?
Yeah. You get sworn in by 4.
Okay.
At this time, I will also issue the oaths of office for our new council members, and if they would join me to this side of the room over here, please. Go ahead and raise your right hand, repeat after me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wyoming. I have not knowingly violated any law related to my election or appointment. Related to my election or appointment. Or cause it to be done by others. And that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Congratulations. I'd like to begin with Councilmember Bates. If he'd like to take an opportunity to introduce his family and friends here this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my Lord Jesus for the opportunity to serve Casper. I'd like to introduce and thank my wife, Jamie, down at the end down there, my daughter, Corinthia, Galatia, and Rachel for their support. I would like to thank you. I'd like to thank everyone who voted for at this last election and voted for the new and reoccurring city council men and women. And my last thanks would be to the people who voted for me in Ward 2. Whether you knew me or you didn't, I appreciate your voting for me and getting to serve you. If I may add, what to expect with me being on city council. And people's asked me that quite a bit. What do we expect from you? What to expect is to provide, protect, respect, and connect. To provide logical reasoning in discussion and in my decision making. Not emotional, not political, but logical. To do my best to protect your your constitutional rights and from small government, taking away any freedoms. I want to respect everyone. Everyone deserves to be respected no matter who you are, where you come from, or what your background is. And I will be the first one to show you respect. The next one would be connect. I will try to connect with Casper through phone, emails, Facebook, cup of coffee, or a simple handshake and a friendly smile. The last thing I'd like to end with is a quote from Henry Ford. He said, "Coming together is good. Staying together is progress. Working together is success." So with this council, city staff, news media, and all the citizens of Casper and beyond, I look forward to working with everyone. And may Casper be a successful town. Thanks.
Councilman Friel.
Thanks. Steve Friel. Tonight I have my wife Jennifer with me, my son Talon, and my daughter Taylor. My son My oldest son Tristan is not here tonight because it is hockey night, and I think he's getting sized for a hockey ring or something tonight, so he decided not to be here. Ward 3, I appreciate all the votes that were given to me. I am very happy to be here and will give it my all. As it was said earlier, all sides of the issue need to be listened to, and I truly believe that. I think that if there's questions that need to be answered, those questions need to be asked, and I plan on making decisions based off of all the facts from all different sides once we have those. So I'll be your person that will be asking a lot of questions, getting in the weeds, and getting to the bottom of each issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Would council members please denote your presence by depressing your yes switch? Chair to entertain a motion to by minute action excuse the absence of Councilwoman Kristen Lutz.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Huber, seconded by Vice Mayor Powell. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. As stated in the rules of the council, the mayor is elected by the city council from their members. Interested members submit their names as candidates for mayor and vice mayor of the council at a work session near the end of the calendar year. An informal and non-binding straw poll is taken by secret ballot at the work session. After the vote, after the vote for mayor, a second straw poll is taken to elect the vice mayor. At the first official council meeting of the year, the prior year's mayor steps aside and the council formally votes on the new mayor and vice mayor. Traditionally, the council members selected are those who were selected by straw poll, and they were elected unanimously. At this time, council will select the mayor for the calendar year 2019. So, with that being said, the chair would entertain a motion to elect Councilmember Powell as mayor of the city of Casper for calendar year 2019.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Sorry, on the wrong side. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
The next order of business will be for council to elect the vice mayor for calendar year 2019. The council will entertain a motion to elect Councilmember Johnson as vice mayor of the Casper City Council for calendar year 2019.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Huber, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
The city clerk will now issue the oaths of office for our mayor and vice mayor.
It's swapping jobs already.
Well-oiled machine.
Charles Powell, Sean Johnson, do solemnly swear or affirm
Do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wyoming,
and the Constitution of the State of Wyoming,
and that I have not knowingly violated any law
that I have not knowingly violated any law
related to my election or appointment
related to my election or appointment
or caused it to be done by others,
or cause it to be done by others,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Johnson, do you have some comments?
Not a whole lot. I just want to thank the citizens of Ward 2 for putting their trust in me and re-electing me to another term on the city council, and to thank the city council for their trust in me to serve as their vice mayor for this year. And I look forward to the next term here on the city council, and look forward to working with all the new people. And I want to thank former Councilman Laird, Morgan, and Humphrey for their service. And I'm looking forward to a new road with a new council and a new / old mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to begin by introducing my wife, Lorraine, who is here. You don't have to stand up. I know you don't like that sort of thing. And she does play a very important role in this process because, in her own words, what she does is she keeps me grounded. And she does a very good job of that, and she takes it very seriously. So that's appreciated. And I also have some members of my church community here as well, and I appreciate their presence. And I think it's worth noting that being on the city council does involve sacrifices, but not just for the members of the council, but for their families. We're gone a lot. There's times we don't get to do things we want to do because of our obligations. And the truth is, we really couldn't do this without their support. And that includes bosses and coworkers who help us out when we have challenges or we need absences for various things. And we thank you. I want to also extend my thank you to the outgoing council members. Jesse Morgan, his attention to detail was rivaled only by former Councilman Steve Cathy, in my estimation. And he was always prepared, and he brought things to our attention that some of us hadn't really thought through or considered, and contributed greatly. Dallas Laird also contributed. He brought the whole issue of school safety to our attention, worked hard on the municipal court changes, and just cared deeply about the city. And with Kaneen, after 12 years on this council, and I don't know if she's watching, probably not, but if she is, she was on this council for 12 years and mayor for 4 years, and all I can say to her is, what were you thinking? Now for me, I was sworn in as mayor exactly 4 years ago. And that was after a challenging 2014. For those of you who remember those times, there was no shortage of drama and conflict. And we had some difficult moments. It's now a distant memory for most of us. But I remember at that time when I was sworn in, I stated that my goal, given all of that drama and controversy, was to be the most boring mayor that Casper had ever seen. And I don't know, you look at all those pictures up there, I think there's a lot of potential for boredom. So I don't know that I was the most boring, but I think for the most part I did pretty well with that. But it wasn't a boring year, because it was just a few weeks into my term that oil dropped to $20, and our sales tax revenues just went down dramatically. And we've been dealing with those problems ever since. We've done a number of things to try to stabilize our situation. We instituted an early retirement program, which had some of our more experienced and more expensive staff members retire. We put in a hiring freeze. We eliminated well over 60 positions in the city without a noticeable reduction in services, which I think was quite an achievement. And so with those things and the tireless efforts of Mr. Napier and his staff, we've pretty much stabilized things, but we're still in a somewhat precarious situation as far as our basic financing of the city. So there's a couple challenges I want to point out as we head into 2019. We have some short-term challenges. As noted, our health insurance fund is in trouble, and it needs a short-term solution and it needs a long-term solution, and we've got to work on that. We've got to continue to work on making sure we can balance that budget with all the revenue uncertainties that we're dealing with. And we're so dependent upon the state for our revenue that we'll see how things play out in the next session, but we need to make sure that people understand the importance of the basic services that the city provides. We have a $1.7 million problem that we have to pay back. That wasn't really our fault. And we don't have excess revenue to take care of that problem. And that's, you all know what that was about. That was money that we were given that wasn't really supposed to be ours. We need to work on staff compensation. It's very costly to replace and train staff, and we need to hold on to the quality of people that we have. And we're going to have more and more trouble doing that if we don't keep working on staff compensation. More specifically, we have challenges with our police department, both with recruitment and retention. And we need to work hard on making sure that we take care of those folks so they stay with us and that we're able to recruit new officers. We also have some long-term challenges. Both our water treatment plant and our wastewater treatment plant are in need of major upgrades and expensive upgrades. We have a problem with our stormwater system. We have approximately $50 million of improvements that are needed, and that's to protect us in the event that we have a very serious weather event. And right now, we have some vulnerabilities, and that system needs to be improved. And we need a new police station. And that's something we've all come to an understanding of over the past year. And this council isn't going to solve all those problems. But we have a responsibility to get started with those things so a future council isn't stuck with a crisis that we overlooked or let slide. So we've got work to do. The state has funds that are available for the water treatment plant and wastewater treatment plant improvements. There are different loan funds and grants that we can achieve, and we've put some money aside for those problems as well. With respect to the stormwater problem, however, there is no real clear funding mechanism for that. We've tried to use our 1-cent funds here and there, but there's so many other things we need to fund with that money that it just isn't sufficient. And so the stormwater system needs attention, and it needs a funding source. And we're really in the same situation with the police station. We have set aside money through the 1-cent 16 process for site selection and engineering, but it's not really clear how we're going to find a way to build it. And so this council needs to get started with some creative solutions so that we can get started with that project. Now, all of those things said, some good things have happened over the past several years that we're all aware of. We've seen a resurgence in our downtown. People are excited about all of the growth down there. We've accomplished several major facility upgrades with our ski area, our golf course, our trails, our rec center. We've also made progress on the river restoration project, which is something that's going to benefit Casper for the next 50 years, if not longer. The state office project is underway, and we've started work on rebuilding Midwest Avenue, a project that's long overdue. We'll keep moving forward with these things. The next major challenge with our downtown core is housing. We have got to have options for people to live in the city's core. All the studies say that we have several thousand people that are living in Casper right now that would choose to live downtown if there was a quality market rate option for them. And all of the growth that we've seen downtown is at risk if that doesn't happen, because you have to have people living downtown to really utilize all of those changes in those retail establishments. We have many assets. Unlike most cities the size of Casper, we're essentially debt-free, and we take that for granted. But it gives us a lot of freedom that other communities don't have. We have, as other people have noted, a strong and committed city staff. And we have a council that has a good history of working together. We've got some things working for us. And with that said, I want to, well, I think I'll skip ahead. My schedule, just so you're all aware, will allow me to be an active mayor. I think there's more to transparency than just providing records when someone asks for them. Transparency is about providing explanations for the things that council has done or the issues in front of council. It's about being out in the community. It's about being present. It's about responding to information requests. And I plan to do those things. I hope to attend every board and commission that the city has a relationship with at least one time over the next year. And if anyone has an event that they want the mayor present at, just call the city manager's office and we'll try to make that happen. So I do want to compliment Mayor Pacheco. I think you've done an excellent job. You've run the meetings in an orderly manner. You were fair. You made sure everyone was heard. And you represented the council well in public gatherings and in the media. And that's what I hope to do as well. So that's what I have to say. And I would just simply like to close by echoing Governor Gordon's remarks yesterday and say that I think Casper's best years are ahead of us. So let's get to work. Thank you. And would council, oh, we've got a plaque to do. So this plaque has the names of each council member on it, and it says, Ray Pacheco, City of Casper, Wyoming, Mayor, 2018. Presented with sincere appreciation for outstanding leadership, effort, and concern on behalf of the citizens of Casper. Good. And Councilman Pacheco, do you have any closing remarks before we recess?
Just, yeah, very brief, as will be my mantra. A couple things. One, I needed to just make sure that I want to thank the city staff for their hard work. It made my life as a mayor so seamless and easy. I am profoundly indebted to the city staff for their hard work that they've done for me. And I am in awe of the work that they do. And being able to see that the work that they put in, the hours that they put in for us, and the effort that they put in for us is short of amazing. So I want to make sure I thank them for their hard work. This last year there were good moments, there were hard moments, but what I'm going to take from that is that my understanding of what does it mean to work in government, and one of the things that I've learned from it that I keep continuing to press on young people whenever I go and speak to them about being in public service or community service. We are in a very, very different time in our country, even in our world. And one of the greatest threats, I believe, to us is not an outside war, not an outside country. I think it's within. And I think part of that is that how we treat one another, how we see each other, how we respect one another and our differences, and how we look at those opinions with respect, understanding, and compassion. And I think if we lose sight of that, that can be the greatest threat, I think, to the United States. When we look at this, hopefully what I've learned from this opportunity is to work together. And this group here that I've had an opportunity to work with this last year has been nothing short of great and fun to work with. There's been challenges, we've disagreed, we've argued. We may have raised our voices here and there, but we've done a lot of good things, and I want to I'm very grateful for the work that they've done. Finally, I want to just thank my wife, who's sitting out here. She said she was going to come tonight, and our other kids are busy with other stuff, and my daughter's here too, Maddie. Susie put up with a lot of me saying, I can't make it to this, I can't go to that, I won't be able to do that, and she held the fort down at our house, and she, like Lorraine Powell, who I know very well, grounded me, and when my head was going to explode from I didn't know what was going to happen with my time, she told me everything was going to be okay. And I know everything will be okay. Thank you so much. God bless you all. And thank you very much for everything that you've done for us.
We will now take a brief recess.
Thank you, appreciate it.
How are you, ladies? Nice to see you tonight. I'm doing well. Oh, yeah, that's it right there. You probably only see the back. I can understand. I can understand. Yes, nice to meet you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Hello. Oh, you're fine. Yeah, I told you I'd be here. I was late, but I was here.
Well, it said on here, but
You're good.
it didn't start.
Stick around, you.
So I don't know.
That's hard. I was supposed to start at 6. I kind of
Yeah,
so.
You got a horn,
too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
I was on the phone. I'll start beating this gavel right now. Let's go, people. The clock, and I was like, oh, it's 6:30. Oh, I better go. Wow. Oh, that's great. John had a stack of them. So. Where'd you go? I should have grabbed a cup of coffee.
This one is for my cabin.
It is exactly 7 right now.
Exactly, so.
I'll walk you out. All right. That's awesome.
That's like looking at the, just so you know, they get lucky and don't get to hear me.
Okay. Do you want me to be in charge of that?
Don't inform me.
Well, maybe I can just
Okay, I'll keep an eye on it. Yeah, because we'll have individuals who can't reach that. Cool. Thank you.
Well, you know,
If we could have everyone take their seat, please. We're ready to get started. Appreciate your patience through all of that ceremonial stuff we had to do. Now, just by way of explanation, we now take communications earlier in the meeting, and that is so people have an opportunity to comment on something before we vote on it. So now is the time we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address. Please direct all questions to me as mayor. There'll be no personal attacks on council members. Council will not respond to personnel matters. These will be referred to the city manager. Questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by council members. And presentations will be limited to 5 minutes. And please, no duplication of speakers. And no time extensions will be permitted, particularly this evening, given our time constraints here. So, would anyone like to come forward this evening? Good evening.
Good evening. Some of you already know me, the new guys don't. My name is Mary Price. Last summer I started the organization Friends of Catsy and Public Transportation. I would like to start off by kind of an apology. It came to my attention that some of the members thought we were an angry mob when we showed up. And I assure you, we're not. No pitchforks, torches, or hippie sit-ins, I promise. But I wanted to let you know what we have done and what we've accomplished. We were caught short last year when the block didn't get granted, it wasn't passed, in that it affected the poorest of the poor that ride the buses. So what we did was, with this organization, I started a Facebook page. It's called Casper, Wyoming Friends of Catsy and Public Transportation, in case anybody wants to check it out. I started a donate button. I understand Catsy did on their website as well. We did some fundraising. My church raised money. They got some grants, and I think we got it covered. But I wanted to let you know also, we're not always going to come in here with our hand out looking for money, okay? We are capable of trying to solve our own problems, and that's why I formed the organization. Also, we have meetings. They are the last Friday of every other month at 12 noon at Wyoming Independent Living. They're open to the public. Anybody can come. Bring your own lunch because we don't serve it. But what happened last year was poor Aaron Clokey got up and presented bus route changes. Well, we didn't know he was going to do that, and we thought it was a done deal, and nobody had talked to us about it. So if we appeared angry, it was like shock and devastation more. After that meeting, Aaron reached out to us, and he said, what can we do? And I said, we feel like nobody's listening to us. And so he has been communicating with us. We have at the meetings, he said, you know, we've got to do some changes. And I said, well, you know, we need to figure out a way so that everybody feels like they've had a voice. Now, communicating with this particular population, it's very hard. A lot of people don't have computers. We live month to month, and so our telephone minutes run out. Communication is a problem. So what we decided to do, Aaron and I put our heads together, and we came up with an idea to have a survey. And Aaron made out the survey and ran off the copies and posters, and there's a group of people sitting behind me. I don't know, where did he go? Where did John go? Okay, well, anyway, what we did was we ran around with posters and the surveys. Marge has helped us by giving them to the bus drivers to hand out to people. We figured that's a good way to get a hold of people, stating what the changes would be, leaving room for comments, and they could also call in. The surveys are doing good. We've gotten more than I expected. So we feel like we've had a voice at least in the changes, and I think you guys will be happy when you see the results of the survey. This is an ongoing process. We are going to continue with the meetings. We've got a lot of different things that we do need to solve, and I'm hoping that by establishing better communications, like I said, we're not always going to come here and ask for money, okay? But we figure you guys have resources, and we're willing to and open to whatever can help us in our situations. There's a lot of us that are disabled, but we're willing to work. We're not afraid to get out there and put posters up and run all over town and whatnot. And
30 seconds, Ms. Price, please.
Okie doke. I got it. And that's really all I wanted to say and kind of introduce myself to the new guys. Thank you.
And thank you for all you've done. Just so that those of you who are here concerned about the CATSI route are aware, and thank you for your comments, we do have time set aside for a public hearing, so if you're concerned about that, that will take place later in the meeting, okay? Mr. Steensland.
Dennis Steensland, 533 South Washington. I'm just here to congratulate all of you that are up there. I appreciate all the dedication you have to putting in the time you have. I hope it's a good 2019. And my only request is that everybody learn to turn on your mic and speak into the mic. It's very frustrating to sit at home and try to participate in this meeting, and you can't hear anybody. It's just a waste of time. So that's my only comments. I do admire that you put in the work you do, and I hope we have a good next year. or this year.
Thank you. And thank you for that reminder. It seems we should have someone almost monitor and call in if we're having trouble, because we don't know up here how well we're being heard. So, okay. Good evening, Mr. Goodenough.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and new council members. I wasn't going to say anything, but you've heard that before, right? When you were remarking, Mr. Mayor, on the budget problems of the past year, there was one significant item you overlooked, I thought, and whenever I make comments and statements here, if I'm ever wrong, I want you to immediately point that out. But I'm fairly certain that the budget was also balanced by raising the franchise fee by 2% on everybody's electrical bills, which 1% franchise fee brings in $400,000. And so by raising it 2%, that brought in $800,000, which was a big factor in balancing the budget. So you just, I think, overlooked that, but I wanted to point that out. And that's the advantage of having somebody like me with a lot of institutional memory to come down here and kind of fill in the gaps if there happen to be any. So I just wanted to say that, and I applaud the new people for running and getting elected, and you took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Wyoming, and so there'll be lots of people that will be pointing out those issues throughout the next 2 years, because I really think the citizens are starting to pay more attention to what the elected officials do, especially on a local level. So you'll probably be getting a lot of comments on those types of issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Goodenough? Okay. Anyone else? I'm guessing we'll have more comments when we get to that public hearing. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the vacation and replat to create the Elkhorn Village Addition and the zoning of the addition. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Your Honor, we have 2 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier dated December 26, 2018. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated December 26, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The thrust behind tonight's consideration is with regard to the subject area being considered for a number of approvals this evening that would allow for this subdivision to come into play. As the exhibit here would indicate, the area in question, the Elkhorn Village Addition, is north of East 12th and Elkhorn Valley Drive, and would convert 21 acres of open land into subdivision property. The zoning classification that's being requested this evening is actually being requested as a 1-unit single-family home residential type classification that would effectively consolidate the amount of classifications that are currently existing in the area in question into to one accommodating, like I said, single-family homes. With that, Mr. Mayor, tonight's approval would be under an ordinance format that would require a first reading this evening and 2 consecutive readings in our subsequent meetings thereafter.
Okay, thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the Elkhorn Village Addition to please approach the lectern. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. My name is Brandon Daigle with River Valley Builders, speaking on behalf of Blackmore Homes, the applicant tonight. Our address is 1616 East F Street. Mr. Mayor, congratulations on the new appointment, and on Vice Mayor as well. And to the new council members, thanks for serving our community. I'm here tonight to just broadly go over the project. This is an extension of Elkhorn Valley Drive on the east end of 12th Street, which would connect up to Newport Drive with 2 new streets being created, both of which would be interior to the Elkhorn Valley Drive extending up to Newport Street. The intention of these single-family homes and dwelling units is that those along the east side or the right-hand side of the image in that cul-de-sac would retain the same values of the homes along Elkhorn Valley Drive, along with the west side of Elkhorn Valley Drive, with homes ranging from upper 700,000s to multi-million-dollar homes along that east side. The loop on the interior portion of the site will have homes ranging from the mid 300s up to the low 400s is the targeted price point for these homes. These homes will be separate from the HOA that is part of Blackmore, which is in the orange on your slide. The intention is that the homes that are being built in there that remain, this would be a different product to complement those, but yet offer different opportunities for people in this area on the east side of Casper. And at this time, I'd entertain any questions or concerns of the.
Any questions for Mr. Daigle? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not so much a question, but I'd like to compliment these guys on putting this together like this. If you note very carefully, there is a place where East 12th would have a little piece of that lot sticking out. That's one of the conditions that they've agreed to fix so that East 12th isn't blocked. And they've also got 3 walkways that are installed in this for walkability. And it's something that those of us who ride bicycles and walk really appreciate that, and it's a good idea. I just thank you for doing that.
Other questions for Mr. Daigle? Councilman Friel.
The only question I would have is how many lots are going to be platted in this area? 54? Okay, thank you.
My question is more general. I'm just curious, Brandon. We've had, let's just say our housing market has been soft recently, and yet we have a developer willing to take a risk here and build some fairly expensive units. I assume you're projecting growth and stability in that market.
Hopefully, yeah. Yes, we are. Specifically at the price points that I outlined, we found that there's a hole in available land, and particularly the 300s and the higher end homes. We have the market or the amount of lots to accommodate that mid-range of home, but those lower entry-level homes and then the higher, more estate-style homes, there's a limited availability specifically on the east side. So we're hoping to address those 2 needs in the coming years. You know, ideally, we'd like to have this built out in no less than 10 years, completely built out and moving on to other phases. Optimistically, I'd like to have it done in 4 or 5 years, but we can only build so many houses per summer. So we'll see how that goes.
It's good to hear, and it's appreciate your confidence in our community to make this investment. Thank you. You were all set. Would anyone else care to come forward to speak in favor of this addition? There being no others to speak in favor, I would now ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the Elkhorn Village addition to please approach the lectern. Anyone here to speak in opposition? Okay, there being no others to speak, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving a replat, subdivision agreement, and zone change for the Elkhorn Village Addition subdivision in the city of Casper, Wyoming.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Councilman Pacheco. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one question, the answer to which is probably really obvious. There's nothing at all that I can see here that's inconsistent with the use or zoning in the surrounding areas. Am I correct?
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, you are correct, and I think that was part of the reason that the Planning Commission voted unanimously to support this proposal.
Thank you.
Okay. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision to deny a conditional use permit for an off-premise sign or billboard in a C2 General Business Zoning District on Lot 4, Block 159, Casper Edition, located at 1329 South Poplar Street, for applicants David DeWald and Lamar Advertising. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Your Honor, we have a number of exhibits tonight, 17 exhibits in total, and I believe that at least one side will have some additional exhibits during the presentation. We have Exhibit 1A, which is the conditional use permit application. Exhibit 1B, map of the 300-foot notification zone so that the surrounding neighbors would be aware of the Planning and Zoning meeting as well as this meeting. Exhibit 1C, the legal notice sent to the Casper Star-Tribune advertising the date of the public hearing. Exhibit 1D, notice of public hearing sent to the property owners within a 300-feet radius and list of addresses. Exhibit 1E, public comments from Valerie White, 504 Milton Avenue. Exhibit 1F, memo to the chairman and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Exhibit number 2 is findings of fact and conclusions of law for case PLN 018022-C, dated October 18, 2018. Exhibit number 3 is the appeal request from Timothy M. Stubson to Craig Collins, Casper City Planner, and Carter Napier, City Manager, dated October 26, 2018. Exhibit 4A, minutes from the Planning and Zoning meeting dated October 18, 2018. Exhibit 4B, as this was referred to in Exhibit 4A, the video of the Planning and Zoning meeting dated October 18, 2018. And again, I think that is available for queue-up if anybody wants to see that. Exhibit 5, RMG Outdoor, Inc., assessment dated May 2018. Exhibit 6, copy of Section 17.12.240 of the Casper Municipal Code. Exhibit 7, the aerial map. Exhibit 8, property photos. Exhibit 9, the plot plan. Exhibit 10, affidavit of publication is published in the Casper Star-Tribune dated December 26, 2018. And Exhibit 11, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier dated December 21, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, your assignment this evening, if you will, is to entertain the appeal brought by the applicant with regard to the exhibits just identified by the attorney and the question recently denied by the Planning Commission as it relates to the location of an off-premise sign and the property described. With that, Mr. Mayor, if I could turn the time over to the attorney to walk us through the hearing, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. In this case, it is an appeal, but the appeal pursuant to our code mandates that it be a public hearing as well. So we have notified the people of the surrounding community as well as the individuals who participated at the Planning and Zoning meeting. The appeal is, the appellant would be Lamar Advertising, the sign company, as well as Mr. DeWald, and they are represented by Tim Stubson. And the appellant, in this case Lamar and Mr. DeWald, would go first. So when you may now call the participants or the public who wants to participate and speak in favor of the appeal. So this would be in favor of the appeal, which is also in favor of permitting the conditional use permit, permitting the signage at this particular location.
Thank you. So at this time, I will ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the appeal and in favor of issuing the conditional use permit to please approach the lectern. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Tim Stubson. My address is 111 West 2nd Street, Suite 220 here in Casper, and I'm appearing tonight on behalf of Lamar Outdoor Signs, the appellant in this matter. You know, given the ceremony of tonight, I'm reminded of that old maxim that first you get sworn in and then you get sworn at, and hopefully that won't be the case tonight. But we do have, I think, a decision for the council to make tonight. And I've got three separate exhibits that I would offer as part of the proceedings and offer to the council, and I'm not sure how you want me to proceed with distributing those. There's 9 copies and an extra. We've got a couple of other extras if we need them. But just at the outset, just to talk a little generally about the outdoor sign rules, regulations, zoning procedures in the city of Casper. They've gone through a number of revisions over the years. The last one was probably about 2010 or so. Lamar was actually at the table and was a part of those proceedings. And one of the significant things about that last revision is a significant amount of give and take. And there was give in that there were areas that were simply taken off the table for Lamar as far as new sign locations. But they also received, the assurance that if they fell within the parameters of the appropriate zoning, they sort of followed the instructions of the planning and zoning folks, that there would be opportunities to build new signs. We believe in this particular instance, this is well within the parameters of the C2 zoning that applies, that Lamar followed every instruction they were given through the process, that city staff recommended, in fact, that the CUP be approved, and then it was not, and we believe that that was inappropriate. To talk a little bit about the area, and you see here, and everybody's probably familiar with this area, but it's on South Poplar Street, just off of the CY intersection, of course, one of the busiest intersections in town, and that explains probably why we want a sign there. Mr. DeWald's property, which you see on the left side of the picture, it's that single-story structure. That's actually a rental home. There are renters in the home. They will stay in the home. And you can see a mock-up of the sign to scale on this particular photograph, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But remember, this portion of South Poplar it's actually a state highway. We have to get DOT permits as well in order to put up this sign. We believe that if you look at this area, it's entirely consistent with the use of the area. Across the street is the Pizza Hut. They have an on-premise sign right there that's a lit on-premise sign. You can see here, just to the south, the 2-story commercial building that has 3 separate on-premise signs on that structure. There are down the ways as north on South Poplar, an additional sign structure, and this is C2 zoning. So we believe that is consistent with the use and the character of this particular area to allow the CUP. The underlying proceedings, as I mentioned, the staff recommended approval of the CUP, and I must admit we were caught a little bit off guard because there were very few questions at planning and zoning. There was very little discussion, but the CUP was denied, and we really felt that the Planning Commission allowed a single property owner to essentially exercise veto power over the CUP and the sign location, despite the fact that it fits within C2 and it fits all the requirements of C2. If you look at the notification requirements that, and if you look at 1B in your packet, the exhibit, it shows the 300-foot or so circumference where notice has to take place. And that's about approximately 36, 37 separate property owners that were notified at the sign location. There was 1 negative comment, only 1. And that was apparently the basis for denial of the CUP.
1 minute, please.
The negative comment, and I'm sure you're hearing from Ms. White, who owns her company, V&T, owns a multi-unit rental property just to the other side, and you can see that again on your exhibit. The V&T rental property is just to the left of Mr. DeWald's property. The basis was an assertion that it would be unrentable if the sign was allowed to go up. And we would just submit that we don't believe that if you look around the city that that's a supportable assertion. You have C2 zoning all around the city. You have multi-unit rental units like this all around the city, some near signs exactly like this, and they aren't boarded up, and they aren't shuttered, and they aren't empty, they're rented. We believe, again, that because this falls within the realm of C2, because we have followed all the requirements placed upon us by planning and zoning, that it is appropriate to allow the CUP, and we would ask that you do so.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Stubbs? Mr. Frew.
Thank you. Mr. Stubson, you talked about the Department of Transportation would have to give you a permit in order to do this, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, and have you taken that step yet, or does it need to pass this point before you can go in front of the DOT?
I believe that's already been done. I believe that permitting process has already been done.
Okay, so that was successful in doing that?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not see, or don't I recall, driving up and down the street, any, quote, off-premise billboards anywhere from Poplar down to Collins Drive. Is this the only one?
From Poplar to Collins?
CY to Collins, I think you mean, right?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Thanks. I was, from CY to Collins, this would be the only one. There is one about only a block away or so on CY and 13th. There is one present there. And then there's one just the other side, maybe 1,000 feet or so the other side of Collins.
And one more follow-up. I also note that there's other businesses there that do have signs, but they are monument-type signs. They're not 35 feet off the ground and 300 or 237 square feet. Is that about right?
Councilman Hopkins, that's correct. And if you look at actually Exhibit 3, that's probably the one that shows you the view going north the best, where you can see, of course, the Pizza Hut with their on-building sign and the monument sign that they have right next to the roadway that's lit up right there.
But that's also a sign for the Pizza Hut. This sign would be for rent to anybody.
Correct. It's an on-premise sign. This is an off-premise sign.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Stubson? And this would be a lit sign?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The sign would be lit. It's set on it's set to it's designed to prevent light pollution, and B, it's set, the lights go off at 11 o'clock. So you can see on your photographs here a number of street lights around. So they remain lit, of course, but the sign at 11 o'clock goes dark. If there's no advertising on the sign, it's dark when it has no advertising on it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilman Friel.
One last question. So in these pictures that we're looking at, is this this is to scale, so this should be exactly?
Right. This is really, hopefully, to leave you very little guesswork of what you're going to see if the CUP is granted and it's built. This is to scale and demonstrates exactly what it'll look like if it's built.
And then one follow-up question, as far as the lighting goes, is that lighting, there's no down lighting on these, is there?
I don't believe so. This is sort of the latest, greatest LED lighting that they have, and it's designed to prevent that sort of light pollution that you see with the down lighting. So,
okay. Thank you.
One more question for me. Did you and your contacts at Lamar ever discuss a smaller sign or a sign that wasn't raised as high in the air, or is this kind of the only option under consideration?
I don't know the answer to that, other than to tell you that this size signage is what is called out for in the city's own off-premises sign rules and regulations, and what was called for by staff when they made the recommendation for approval of the CUP.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Stubson, I think you commented about the nearest billboard size sign for off-premises advertising is basically facing east-west on CY at 13th.
I believe it's at the corner of 13th and CY. I can't remember which way it faces.
That's been there for a really long time, hasn't it?
That I can't answer.
At least as long as I can remember.
Then that must be a long time.
I like you a lot, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stubson. Oh, Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so we're clear, we are talking about a conditional use permit here because this sign is an off-premise sign. This is not a sign that's related to a business in that house, even though that's a C2 property. So there's a slight difference between an off-premise sign and a sign that you put on their business.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else who would care to speak in favor of issuing this conditional use permit to allow the sign to be present? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, my name is David DeWald. I live at 122 South Elk Street, and I am the owner of this property at 1329 South Poplar. I will quickly answer Councilman Huber's question. The billboard on CY and 13th, my recollection, that's been there at least 40 years. And Councilman Hopkins, the answer to your question is yes, there's a big difference between a business having a sign, which would be completely allowable in a C2, as opposed to a conditional use, which is for non-business, for other businesses and other entities to use as a tool for their businesses. Some of you were here just a little over 2 years ago when the Poplar Street corridor got changed because for a while it had been in the old Yellowstone District zoning. And due to inactivity primarily, it was agreed to and changed by council, by city council, to re-change that from OID zoning to C2. And I was at that meeting. And at that meeting, I stood up and requested that if they're just going to carte blanche change it to C2, that I would like at that point to have made it change to C4 for my property. That didn't go over very well. But what I was told then was I needed to back up and go through the proper steps to get a conditional use, and that's what we are doing here tonight. I've owned this property for quite some time. I do know Valerie White, the neighbor to the north, and have met with their tenants on numerous occasions. I've fixed some things that have broken on their property, and for the most part, it's pretty amicable. But I am here to request this conditional use permit for a billboard, and I don't want you to think of this billboard so much of a sign, but as a tool that the city does not have to pay for, but has equal opportunity to use, just like businesses, individuals, nonprofit organizations, and individuals. A tool to reminder for the community to support the United Way and other charitable uses that make up the great city of Casper, or a tool for a restaurant or a bar to bring in more patrons. A tool to make a declaration of love for a proposal or to celebrate somebody's birthday. Or a tool to help remind voters support the 1-cent tax that benefits all of us. And lastly, it can also be used as a tool to help children that have been kidnapped and taken and been abducted. It gives us an opportunity to see that face and help be on the lookout. This billboard tool can also be used in conjunction with the Casper Visitors Bureau and the Downtown Development Association to encourage visitors to come through here to stay and spend more money, to enjoy what our town has to offer, and to get them to be acclimated within the town itself. We're half a mile, so if that billboard said half a mile turn right, they're down at the Davis Street Station, they're down to historic Casper, they're down to restaurants and bars. If it said straight ahead, a mile and a half, they would have access to many motels, the Crossroads Park, the Rotary Duck Derby, and if it said straight ahead 2.5 miles, they'd be able to participate in the National Historic Trails Interpretive Center as well as the Casper Event Center.
1 minute, please.
And so I'm here to ask that you let Casper use this tool so that everybody may benefit. Everybody can be part of an economic toolbox and have this one more piece that will help benefit everybody in Casper. And like it was brought up earlier today, once we start building condominiums down in Old Yellowstone District, it can be used as a tool for that as well, to show images of some new downtown homes and condos that will be available for people to come and stay and hopefully join us here in this great city. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. questions from council? No questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor of the conditional use permit?
Well, after hearing this gentleman talk, I really like this idea. I think I can use it as well, and I think it would benefit Casper, and I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being no others to speak in favor, I now ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition of the appeal and issuing of this conditional use permit to please approach the lectern. Good evening.
I'm Valerie White, and I own the property directly north of this proposed billboard. And I did go to the zoning commission meeting and express that I felt this billboard would diminish my ability to rent the property, would diminish the rents, and devalue the property. Not only do I have that to deal with, but this would block sunlight. We have a beautiful view of the mountains from the one of the apartments upstairs. Totally take that out. The view of the mountain down there is very rare, and it's a very nice view. We lose that. I rely on this property for my income, and I have a mortgage on this property. I need the rents to pay that mortgage. This billboard would be, in my opinion, too large, would block the view, would block the sunlight, and the lighting until 10, 11 o'clock at night, even though we are not zoned residential, there's a tremendous amount of residential around us. I can't believe that that is acceptable in a residential setting. So I would appreciate council considering respectfully to uphold the unanimous vote of the zoning committee to deny this billboard.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Questions from council? Vice Mayor Johnson.
Well, looking at this third picture, if the sign placement doesn't change, I really don't see where that sign blocks any window views from that property. And also, I was wondering, do you have any type of anything from, an appraiser or somebody that would say that this type of thing would diminish your property value?
If-
Excuse me, I'm wondering, ma'am, have you seen this picture that Councilman Johnson's referring to?
No, I
think
do
Mr.
not have a
Stubbs
copy
might
of
be
that.
handing
Thank
one.
you, Tim.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson.
Okay. So I'm sorry, what was the question?
I was wondering if you had anything from an appraiser or somebody that would show how or if this would in fact diminish your property value?
Well, the property value would be diminished by the fact that I would not be able to rent it as easily with a billboard right outside that is lit until 11 o'clock at night. And if you're not able to rent it, the value of that property is certainly not as high as it was before. No, I don't have anything from an appraiser, but I do have a mortgage on that property, and I do rent it now. I do have a long-term renter that rents the property, and he will also speak and explain to you how he feels about it. Simply from that point of view is that there is going to be a view that is blocked, sunlight that is blocked. It's right in our face.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Huber, please up to the microphone, please.
Yeah, okay. I have a couple of questions, ma'am. How long have you owned your property there?
5 years,
And was it zoned, C2 when you purchased that?
yes.
What, if any, understanding did you have when you bought that about what kind of signs or other structures might be erected to the south of you there?
Well, this is, as my understanding, this is a special permit that was not something that I think we would have discussed. I realize that being commercial property, other things can certainly be put on that would certainly be legal. But no, we didn't discuss anything to that point when we bought the property. It was, and still is, a multifamily building.
Well, ma'am, and when you say by other things, do you mean, like, for instance, the Pizza Hut across the street, other businesses like that that are in that area?
My understanding of a commercial zoning is that, yes, that could go in.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Councilman Hopkins.
Yeah, if I understand it correctly, you bought your property 5 years ago.
Correct.
At that point, it was under different zoning rules. As I recall, that was just about 2 years ago, and we changed it back to the rest of the city rules. So when she bought her property, that sign would not have been allowed under OYZ zoning rules.
Other questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Please come forward. I think these folks have been waiting, sir. Well, go ahead. Okay.
Mayor Powell, Councilman, I'm the person that she's talking about that's lived there. I've lived there almost 6 years. That picture that they have up there, the window that you're looking at that would be facing that sign towards the mountain is my view. I'm the one that don't get to see that mountain with that sign right there. The sun, when it comes down across our town that way, it comes through my doors, which they don't have a picture showing that. They just have a picture from the street side here. That would block all the sun that comes in that I see every day coming through my windows. To have a light in my house every day until 11 o'clock at night, I don't think that is, an appropriate deal. It hasn't been there. It's a quiet neighborhood. We have good neighbors. The gentleman that spoke earlier, he wasn't quite forthcoming when he said he's done work for us over there. I've been there almost 6 years. When he had shingles and stuff coming off his house and tearing up our house, yeah, he came and fixed them as he should. It was tearing up that house. He ain't voluntarily came over and done anything. I mean, I feel that this is something for his gain, and I mean, that's how I feel about it, but he's trying to go ahead and put a sign up where the neighbors around me, and they're here, on both sides of us, to the back of us, don't want a sign that's huge, lighting up our house, at nighttime especially. And it is, and it's an eyesore. From 13th on up till CY, there's no signs. If you go all the way down to Collins, there's no signs. Small. There are some on buildings and whatnot, but they're small. But there's nothing like a big monster that's going to be sitting in our front yard or off in his yard that blocks our view or our property. I'm opposed to it.
Okay, thank you. Questions for this gentleman?
I missed his name, Mr. Mayor.
Tony Padilla, 1321 South Poplar.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Oh. Councilman Bates.
If they scaled the sign down, would you have an issue with the sign being there? Are you against the sign, period?
No, sir.
Or that size of a sign?
That size of a sign. I mean, like I said, if you look at the picture, you look out that window at the top, that's my kitchen. That's where we sit. We can see out there, and we can look towards all the way to CY and up and all the mountain. That won't be seen again from that property. And I've been there a long time. I have no intentions of leaving, but that right there would probably make me want to move someplace else because I don't want to see that. Nor if I'm sitting in my kitchen at nighttime, do I want a light shining in my windows until 11 o'clock at night. I don't think anybody would want that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. My name is J.P. Cavagelli. I live at 637 East 11th, but for the past, I've only been there for 2 years. For the past 8 years before that, I live at the house exactly opposite the alley from this place. So I'm on, my other address is on Cedar Street. Let's see. I have a couple of questions about this, or a couple of concerns, I should say. This is basically a billboard-free zone as it stands right now. It's between two really big intersections there by Albertsons and what is it? Pizza Hut. I guess Pizza Hut all the way down to Vintage. There's no billboards in all that area, and there's I think an extra billboard there would be distracting for, it's a very high traffic area. Do we actually need another billboard in that area? I noticed a young lady over here who said she would take advantage of that billboard because the young fellow over here said it would be a good tool for the city. What he didn't mention, I don't think, for her nonprofit is that I'm sure it costs money. I'll stop there on that subject. It's gonna be lighted up at night, and I'm sure that the lights, even though it's a couple of buildings away, will distract all the way out to where I used to live there on Cedar Street. And one of the nice things about the Cedar Street neighborhood there is that people in that street have been putting a lot of work into making the neighborhood a little nicer and not letting it get run down. And I think having a billboard with lights on it would certainly not add to our property values in that area. Let me see what else I got here. I think that's about all I have to say. I'd just like to speak my voice against this billboard, and thanks for listening.
Questions for Mr. Gavicelli?
Gavicelli, thank you.
Councilman Huber.
Sir, I'm pleased to meet the owner of 1324 South Cedar.
Oh, yeah?
In
How
my
come?
childhood, that's where my grandparents lived, and I spent many happy memories up there.
That's really funny. Cool.
Like that neighborhood a lot.
Yeah, it's a nice
Happy
little
to meet you.
neighborhood. And like I said, people have been working pretty hard to improve that whole street area there over the past 10 years, and we like it.
Other questions for Mr. Gavicelli? Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Good evening.
Hello, I'm Tristy Ross. I live at 1316 South Cedar, so it's right behind this proposed billboard. I would like to say that I really enjoy this neighborhood. A few different reasons for that. One is Mayor Powell had mentioned there is not a lot of affordable housing convenient to downtown, and this is a neighborhood that is primarily a bit more affordable, incredibly convenient to live in, and part of that is because we are so close to downtown. We do have things like the Albertsons near us. It's a great place to live. And when I bought the house about 3 years ago, it was zoned as the old Yellowstone District zoning. When that zone change came up, I didn't object to it because the description of what was going to be there was consistent with our residential neighborhood. And, you know, some commercial similar to what's currently there, which does not involve large billboard signs. Part of the reason why I do like our neighborhood so much is that, as JP mentioned, there are a lot of people doing a lot of work on the houses, improving everything about the place. Mary on the corner is constantly working on her house. I didn't know Mrs. White, but she takes such good care of that multi-unit apartment, and all of the people who live there have been just great people to live near, which is not something you always get when you're living downtown, when you're living in a more affordable neighborhood. And so, as I mentioned, when I moved in, there was that zoning change shortly thereafter. Didn't complain because it sounded like it would encourage people to keep the residential aspect of that neighborhood, the character of that neighborhood as a neighborhood, a historic neighborhood of Casper, and a great place to live. You know, what is there right now, there are some small commercial, there is the Pizza Hut, it does have a sign. However, what they're requesting here is a variance from what zoning would normally allow. So they're asking to go outside of the normal bounds of what would be allowed to do this. That means it's not something that just has to be granted. It's also something that I do think would have a negative impact on my house. I'm on the little map, I'm right behind that house, and I have a great outdoor space in my yard. That's the main reason why I bought this house. It's an older home, it has huge trees, it has a beautiful outdoor patio space where I grill and sit around the fire late in the evening. And a billboard that's lit until 11 p.m. Essentially removes my ability to enjoy that part of my yard. So, you know, it's not part of what has to be approved. It's not part of the residential character of that whole neighborhood between CY and Collins, a neighborhood that is enjoyable, a neighborhood that's affordable, and a neighborhood that's been improving significantly over the last few years. And so because of those things, I would respectfully like to ask that you uphold the original decision of the Planning and Zoning Board and not allow this appeal to go through.
Okay, thank you. Questions from council?
No questions from staff.
Let's finish with the hearing, Mr. Councilman Hopkins. Thank you. I think we can go ahead with the motion and then do that, if that's okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition? Okay. There being no others to speak in opposition, I now declare the public hearing closed. The chair would entertain a motion to adopt a resolution.
Mr. Mayor, point of clarification, what
We would be,
the resolution?
it would be to overturn the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission and approve the conditional use permit.
Yeah, or,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, I guess we could make you're correct. We could make either motion. I would take either motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we deny the appeal.
Do I have a second? Discussion. Councilman Hopkins.
This is probably, excuse me, this is probably a question the staff could answer, but if that property that's now zone C2, would this sign be allowable on that property? And if not, how big could a sign be on that particular piece of property if it were a business? And I guess this is just a question for staff.
Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I direct that to our
Oh, I'm sorry.
planner, Mr. Collins? That's okay. That's all right.
Good evening, Mr. Collins.
Good evening. Let me start over. C2 zoning for an on-premise sign, which means for a business that's located on that property, allows up to 600 square feet per the premises. How that's divided up, part of that can be on the building, part of that can be a freestanding sign. A freestanding sign can be up to 300 square feet in size.
Larger than this sign.
Correct.
Slightly.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Collins?
No.
Other discussion? Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one is a difficult, it seems like an easy question to make a decision on because the only difference is the off-premises versus the on-premises, which is the quandary, I think. If, say, Pizza Hut across the street wanted that sign and they took down the rest of their signs, that would be perfectly acceptable on that side, or if a business started there. But because of the off-premise nature, it falls outside the scope of law. And the Planning and Zoning Commission failed to come to the necessary conclusion to pass it. All along that corridor that was changed, any business there could have a sign that large at any time they wanted to, without any permission from Planning and Zoning. Is that correct?
Is that correct, Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, my understanding would be that would be correct for an on-premise.
Without the 300-foot buffer between signs.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, without a conditional use permit request, like in this case.
That has that, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. Well, mine is that this zoning was changed, and I think it was done with the understanding that we may have these very dilemmas come to our attention. And It is an extremely difficult decision because it is a neighborhood in transition. At some point down the road, I suspect that entire corridor will be commercial, but that could be 25 years from now. And so in the meanwhile, we have these competing interests, and it is very difficult to decide. And I think I will also have to side with, I think, what the majority of council must be thinking, based on what I'm hearing, is that that transition is not far enough along to allow this. So I will be voting no. I'll be voting yes on the motion to affirm, to deny the appeal. Any other discussion?
So a yes vote means we're denying, a no vote means the opposite.
Because the motion was to deny the appeal.
Just want to clarify it.
And so a yes vote is to deny the appeal.
And deny the conditional use.
And deny the conditional use permit. So a yes vote denies the sign. A no vote affirms the sign. Any other questions? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With council members Friel and Johnson voting nay, motion passes.
Okay. We're on page 11 then, right? Okay. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration and review of the proposed bus route changes. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Your Honor, we have two exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier, dated December 26, 2018. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated December 26, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The opportunity that we have tonight is to consider some modifications to the bus routes that the transit system utilizes to transport a number of our citizens around the community. The recommendations this evening come as a result of multiple conversations with not only users, but employees of the system and overseers as well, that help us to understand the implications and nuances of any modifications that we might propose. As you heard earlier, this is one step in a fairly complex process as it relates to any modifications at all. And so tonight's portion of that process would simply be to listen, take in public comment, make note of whatever those comments that you would like, ask questions of those that would provide comments this evening, in preparation for a deliberation that we would have at the end of the month in the form of a work session, wherein you would deliberate those comments and prepare a directive for formal consideration in the first meeting in February. I have asked Mr. Clokey to share with you this evening, as a part of this public hearing, the finer details of what it is that's being proposed at this point. No decisions have been made, and to add to your deliberation with regard to modifications that we would potentially consider.
Thank you. Are you coming forward, Aaron, then? Great.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm pleased to be here tonight. This is really the culmination, or the cherry on top, if you will, of this public comment period, which began in late November. This public hearing gives residents and bus riders an opportunity to voice their opinions to their city council in a public setting. And I want to remind for those who are making comments tonight that those comments will be included in their final report and considered for the final proposed changes, which will be presented to council, as the city manager alluded to. Furthermore, I'd like to remind everyone that the survey is still available, and it's still available to be taken until the end of the public comment period, which is Thursday, this Thursday, January 10th. So at this time, I'd like to review the proposed changes to Casper's bus routes. Starting with the red route, there are what is being proposed is a total of 8 bus stops to be removed, predominantly for the reason of just removing them for the sake of, due to low ridership at these particular stops. By doing so, we can speed up the red route a bit and also reduce mileage on the red route while still maintaining coverage. These stops occur along Ash and 7th Street, Ash and CY, and Ash and 14th, southbound, and northbound Ash and 7th, Ash and 10th, and Ash and 14th, and 15th and Ivy, and 15th and Illinois. Also, what is being proposed along the red route is to move the Collins and Walcott bus stop to 6th and Walcott. And the reason for this is to better serve St. Anthony's Manor and to serve more residents than the current bus stop that exists at Collins and Walcott. And that is all for the red route. I can entertain questions now, or I can entertain questions later.
Any questions from council at this point? Okay, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. For the green route, what we are proposing, and this might sound familiar from our deliberations back in July, we're proposing removing 4 stops along the Wilkins Circle area, Saturdays only. And the reason being is that the destinations within the Wilkins Circle area, these destinations aren't even open on Saturday. Aside from the new Gruner Brothers Brewery and Motel 6. But the destinations such as Central Wyoming Counseling Center, Gastroenterology Center, and also Department of Workforce Services that's on Warner Court, these are not open on Saturday, and those are some major destinations. We felt this would reduce mileage and speed up the green route on Saturdays. For those who may still need a ride to Wilkins Circle, maybe an employee at the event center or Motel 6, a deviation would still be available to that person as a special request if it was made in advance. Also, what's being proposed for the green route is the removal of a bus stop at City Park and a bus stop at 13th and Elm due to low ridership. Also, what is being proposed is being considered is a removal of the Smith stop. And this is due to existing coverage by the yellow and purple route. And by receiving feedback from drivers, it was felt that this was, there's a safety issue at making this stop turning off of Poplar Street. Finally, for the green route is we're proposing adding 2 routes. This would be shifting 2, or excuse me, not routes, but shifting 2 bus stops from yellow to green, and those include 669 CY and 555 South Walcott. And the reason for this would be to free up time for the yellow route, and that would be all for the green route.
Any questions at this point from council? Go ahead.
Blue route is, for those of you who are very familiar, is our most popular, most effective, most efficient route. And so when reviewing this particular route, we really didn't want to see too many changes to make. One exception was for the westbound bus stop at 610 South Walsh. The reason for this being is that there's been concerns over the years of buses taking a left-hand turn on 2nd Street. And this poses a safety issue, and it was felt that this would be a good time to remove that stop. This stop would still be served by an eastbound bus, but would just not be served as it goes back downtown. So that's the only modification that's being proposed for the blue route.
So if someone wanted to go downtown, they could get on as it was heading east and just stay on it as it turned around and came back?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that is all for the blue route. Finally, for the yellow route, which I think probably consists of the biggest change that is being proposed. Currently, there are two legs of the yellow route. Paradise Valley and CY runs on even hours only. And then the Poplar Street leg runs on odd hours only. What we are proposing is to combine the Poplar Street and Avenue legs to be driven in a single hour. The reason this has been proposed is because this has created a lot of confusion when it's running on alternating hours. And we think that by combining them, we can also provide greater coverage. Thus, by reducing confusion and greater coverage, we think we can increase ridership along Yellow Route and really provide a route that better serves the riders currently. The cost of which is that we would need to remove particular routes along the Poplar or Kaufman Street on the Poplar Street corridor and in Paradise Valley for a total of 8 bus stops. 4 of those bus stops would be in Paradise Valley and includes 291 Indian Paintbrush, John Quill and Riverbend and Begonia, and a bus stop at Paradise Valley Park. Additional stops would be at 5000 CY Avenue, 3411 South Kaufman, Adams Park, and 1233 West 25th Street. And these bus stops were selected to, in order to achieve the speed needed to have the combined legs of the yellow route, but also they were selected because, frankly, they just have low ridership, much like the other ones that have been selected. And finally, as mentioned earlier with the green route, what is being proposed is shifting 2 bus stops from the yellow to green. And again, those were 669 CY and 555 South Walcott. And that is all for the yellow route. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With all of the route changes that we've got here, the reductions of some of the stops, the ones where the businesses are closed make perfect sense. What benefit do we get from those areas being shut down?
You mean as in the other stops that are proposed?
Probably a lot easier. How's this better than the old one?
Sure. The proposed changes, we feel will speed up the routes, reduce mileage, and in the case, especially in the case of yellow, will have better coverage and every hour, and hopefully we suspect would increase ridership.
Follow-up.
Absolutely nothing in this negatively impacts any services with CATSI, right?
That is correct.
And if someone needed service at one of these spots that maybe is shut down and they couldn't get to, they would still be able to have that opportunity where they could call CATSI.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And so, other questions? Councilman Friel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the green route, you talked about Saturdays. Of course, that would be shut down going to the event center and those businesses. And did I hear you right? You said that there could be a request to be made to drop people off at those locations?
Correct, yeah. Currently there is and has been an option for riders if they need a deviation to make a special request in advance. That deviation is available half a mile from any bus stop.
And then just a follow-up question, Mr. Mayor, if we have an event taking place at the event center on Saturday, is that something that would automatically kick in to where that would be put back into the route to make sure people are able to access the event center, or would they be dropped off at a different location?
Right, so currently it would depend on the time certainly. In the past, we have provided special bus service for special events. If this is something where somebody was trying to use the route for during regular service hours, then that is something that they could request, yes.
Thank you. Other questions, Councilman Bates?
To follow up on Steve's on the green, does it cost any extra for the citizens of Casper to ask for that request?
Yes, I believe it is, and somebody can, in the audience, can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is $1 for the deviation.
Do we have a correction back there?
Yeah, it's, okay, for deviation for elderly and disabled, instead of 50 cents, it's $1. And for general public, instead of $1, it's $2.
Okay, thank you. So Aaron, the trade-off on this yellow route, since those are the most significant changes, if I'm getting this, is that the people in this near those Paradise Valley stops would lose a stop, but they would gain hourly service instead of service every other hour.
Exactly.
And I guess this is kind of a softball question. Do you think it's possible to remove a stop without inconveniencing someone?
Probably not. No matter what changes you make, somebody could possibly be impacted.
Okay, other questions for Aaron? Okay, thank you.
Thank
you. Okay, council will now listen to public comment. Same rules apply, limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers, please. So, at this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak regarding the proposed bus route changes to please approach the lectern.
I don't want you to think that I didn't want to show up and speak. Carol
We're
Krupp.
glad to have you here.
Carol Krupp, 731 Kirk. I just want to reiterate that this has been a process that was encouraged by the council. We were told to cut expenses to be more efficient. So the process for the last year has been arduous at best. We have looked with Aaron, with our fleet manager, with Marge, of course, and with passengers to try to look at each and every stop to make sure that we were causing the least impact to passengers. At the same time, we were increasing safety in some instances, as example on the blue route, taking away that left turn, and also making it more convenient for people with all the changes that were made to the yellow route. The yellow route used to be one of the most used routes. A couple years ago, there was a transportation plan that suggested we could cover more stops if we did this alternate service of half an hour one way and half an hour the other way. Passengers never got it. Ridership dropped off. It was really detrimental to the system. So we were thrilled to have this opportunity to do things like to fix that. When we started this system years and years ago, we picked the routes out of a need to serve the people who need it the most. I'm really proud to say that we've continued that. We're covering the areas of the community that have to be covered. In spite of the growth in the community, we've been able to keep up with spreading the buses out. By adding in Mills and Evansville service, we've expanded the service. So it's been a remarkable process to be able to go back in, look at each of these stops, and using the knowledge that the CATSI staff has to evaluate exactly what we needed to do to make it just a little bit better. And some of those stops that are eliminated, there are riders at those stops. But with route deviation, also with our ability to do some other things, we're hoping that we'll still be able to keep the system going, because the financial burden is something you're going to have to deal with. And part of what we have to do is address that financial burden at the same time we continue to provide the service.
Questions for Ms. Crum? Councilman Walsh.
I'll quote you, so I want to make sure I've got it right. You're comfortable with the compromise that with the
Yes, we're
bus routes and
comfortable
that
with
kind of thing?
Marge is comfortable, I'm comfortable, our board is comfortable, and the CATSI staff is comfortable.
And I'm comfortable.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
I have,
I'm not saying when we come back next year with the budget, we're not going to freak you out. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that these route changes are going to do some of what you ask for. You ask for more efficiency. You ask for some cost savings. We're going to have some cost savings. They're not going to be near enough. You're still going to be looking at budget issues, but they are a step in trying to get us to that direction, that we can help you with the finances.
so Carol, part of the reason to put the bus system in place all those years ago was to reduce the demand on CATSI and also to get a whole nother ridership into the public transportation system. Am I correct that we're starting to see a little backtrack on that as the population ages, and that we would anticipate more demands on CATSI and thus more budgetary
You're
pressure?
correct. When we started the bus, one of the main reasons to start it was to cut back the demand for CATSI, because CATSI is so much more expensive than the bus to run. That worked. That worked for quite a few years. But with the changes in demographics in the community, we're beginning to see a real uptick in CATSI. We're, for the first time, starting to have wait lists consistently for CATSI. People now have to call a couple days ahead to get a CATSI ride, and that's strictly volume and the level of service that people need. We're having a lot more people in wheelchairs, a lot more people with assistive devices that take longer to load and unload. So the CATSI population is changing back, but that's not anything to do with what CATSI's doing, that's just the nature of the beast. At the same time, the bus ridership is still going up. So we're meeting that, get some extra people to ride, but we can't really do anything about people aging.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Councilman Bates.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming up and talking to us.
Sure, come ride the bus.
I have and I will again. You mentioned that PV area, or CY, the yellow, was up until the hours changed from alternative hours, and then the people that rode, it decreased, correct?
It did.
So if you just change the hours and not so much some of the losing some of the stops, wouldn't it go back to about the same? Or
Well, you can't just change the hours without changing stops, because it takes X amount of time to go from here to there. And the yellow route, in order to make that loop that it was scheduled to make, took enough time that you couldn't go both directions every hour. So what we've done is we've gone back and we've changed yellow enough that it'll be able to hit those stops that are now yellow. We took some of the yellow, attached them to green. We did some other tweaking of things, of the routes, to be sure all the area was covered in the hour allotment instead of that on again, off again thingy that it was doing.
You could never do the route without those changes within an hour,
Right,
because you're
Yeah.
trying to do both legs instead of separating them.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you always.
Anyone else care to speak? 3 times in one night.
Can't help. Mary Price again. Yeah, I would like to just say, and please excuse me, I did kind of step in it with that billboard thing, but I think the billboard's a good idea, just hopefully somewhere else. And as to the fact that we're a nonprofit and we'd have to pay for it, that gives me an opportunity to say that part of what my organization is doing is kicking around ideas to create extra revenue so that we can do things like that. As far as the changes on the bus routes go, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, and what I'm feeling for myself is these are okay changes. And I haven't heard really hardly anybody saying, oh my God, I can't do that. So I think that you'll be pleased in seeing the results of our surveys. One comment I would like to make, though, about the blue bus. It is very popular, and one thing I would like to strive for is getting an extra bus or something. I don't know what the answer is there. We're working on that too, of course, but it is so crowded sometimes. The bus is, I mean, stacked, and the bus drivers sometimes, whoever's waiting at a stop, they have to tell them, you'll have to wait for the next bus. And if you can imagine standing out at the stop in all kinds of weather, and you've got a doctor's appointment or you got to get to work, that's a real bummer. And so one of the things I'd like to work on is seeing what we can do about that. And I'm going to put that in my comment on my survey. But the most part, yeah, these buses are needed. And part of what I'm seeing is, like you're saying, our population is aging, it is changing, there is more demand on CATSI. It's been harder. There have been some situations where it was just hard, let's put it that way. And it's getting harder. So I feel that really should be a priority because, and like she mentioned, there's more wheelchairs. That takes longer, so that slows everything down. And doctors do not like it when you're late to an appointment. Usually that's too bad for you. So I really think that is a serious situation that needs to be addressed. And again, hopefully my organization can help out with some of that as well. And I'm not saying we may not come back and ask for money, but we're trying our best to get separate sources of revenue as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Ms. Price? Okay, I don't think so. I think you're in the clear. Anyone else care to speak this evening on the bus route changes? Well, I would like to thank you all for your patience. You had to wait a long time to speak, but I also want to compliment you on being open-minded and working with us on this, because there was a lot of concern that Council was not supportive of CATSI and the bus, and that we had more dramatic changes in mind. And I also want to compliment Aaron Clokey for working with these folks and taking a great deal of time to listen to their concerns and try to build some consensus, because it sure makes life easier for us when people can come forward and say, we think this will work. So thank you all. There being no others to speak for or against the issues involving the proposed. Oh. Could we get your name and address for the record, please?
I'm Val Wilson, and I lived at Gale Gardens.
Thank you.
The things that I've seen on these changes is that they're going from stops that didn't have a lot of riders to stops that do have riders in it, that they're needed. And she's right. I ride the blue bus twice a week at least, and it's packed a lot. I mean, standing room only sometimes. And we really need some extra help with that.
Okay.
But I want to say I'm really grateful that we have one. I'm 70 years old. I don't drive anymore, and I need to get to Walmart. I got grandkids that are coming over. I gotta feed them. And I gotta get up there and get groceries. So, you know, if it wasn't for the blue bus, I don't know what I would do. And it's not just elderly and disabled now. I see more and more people who have low-income jobs who don't have a way to get to and from work without the bus. So, thanks.
Thank you, and your comments will be part of the record, so. There being no others to speak for or against the issues involving the bus route changes, I now declare the public hearing closed. And this item requires no action by the City Council at this time. As the City Manager explained, we will be dealing with it later in a work session. A report detailing public feedback will be discussed at a work session actually on January 29th, 2019, and Council will then be asked to take action on the final proposals at the February 5th, 2019 regular Council meeting in these chambers. Council will now discuss the ordinance permitting distillery satellite tasting rooms. And this is the third reading for this ordinance. We have heard it twice prior. This item will be open for public comment and discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance amending Chapter 5.08 of the Casper Municipal Code to permit distillery satellite tasting rooms.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
I missed that. I'm a little out of practice. Motion made by Councilman Pacheco and seconded by Councilman Huber. Let's see. Council will now listen to public comment. Does anyone care to come forward and comment on this? Good evening, and thank you for your patience.
Oh, good evening. It's been a great meeting so far, actually. Amber Pollock, 229 West 11th Street. I'd like to speak in favor of this ordinance, and I just wanted to come up, as we have some new council members, to stand for any questions, if there were any, before the third and final vote.
Questions for Ms. Pollock? I guess not.
Right. Straightforward. I like it. Thank you so much.
Discussion. Amendments. Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Okay. Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 19A1, a resolution authorizing the release of local assessment district liens. Item 19A2, a resolution authorizing acceptance of grant funds from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Item 19A3, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 with 71 Construction LLC for the K Street Improvements Phase 1 project. Item 19A4, a resolution authorizing a contract for professional services with Strata Inc. for engineering services for the 2019 Geotech for Capital Projects project. Item 19A5, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 with Dan Hart Patrol Service LLC for an increase in funds and an extension of 38 days for the Casper Balefield Closure Earthworks project. Item 19A6, a resolution authorizing a contract for professional services with WWC Engineering for design, bidding, and construction administration services for the Midwest Avenue Reconstruction Project, Elm Street to Walnut Street. Item 19A7, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Andreen Hunt Construction, Inc. for the Highland Park Cemetery Phase 2 project. And item 19A8, a resolution authorizing a contract for professional services with WLC Engineering and Surveying for construction administration and surveying services for the Highland Park Cemetery Addition Phase 2.
The chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Any abstentions or nay votes?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I hear Councilman Laird echoing around in here about change orders. Having made that comment, I would also note that we're talking about $150,000 for outside engineering contracts. And you're gonna hear me keep saying, why don't we hire some more engineering staff and just do this stuff in-house? But
Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 20A1, designating the following banks as approved depositories of City of Casper funds for calendar year 2019. First Interstate Bank, Hilltop National Bank, Jonah Bank of Wyoming, U.S. Bank, and ANB Bank. Item 20A2, designating the Casper Journal and the Casper Star Tribune as the Casper's official newspaper for the calendar year 2019. Item 20A3, reappointing Jennifer Rohr and Errol Miller to the Central Wyoming Senior Services Advisory Board, each for one additional 3-year term. And item 20A4, authorizing the appointment of James W. Tim Monroe to the Civil Service Commission for a 3-year term.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
At this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. Let's start with you, Councilman Pacheco. Do you have anything this evening?
None tonight. Thank you, though.
Councilman Huber.
nothing.
Councilman Freeland.
Well, being as I'm new to this, I guess I'll ask a few questions. I guess the first question I would have, and I don't know if this is proper form to ask it, but as far as employees, the wage freeze itself, is that something that could be put on a work agenda to where, obviously, as people that are new to the council could get a rundown of exactly where we started at, where we're at today, and how far in the future we're looking before that can be lifted?
I think we can. And when, next week, we do have on our agenda a discussion of how to manage our work session.